Yes.
The lead Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1481 of the War News stream. And we have a special midday stream for you all today, of course. And we are seeing some very big news breaking out. We are seeing that U.S. airstrikes are escalating on Iran amid Iranian retaliation against the Gulf states. We've also seen that Taiwan is now warning of a massive Chinese incursion near the island. And also, Moscow is reporting a major non-stop drone attack, and they've currently deployed forces around the Kremlin. So we have very big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours, actually the past 12 hours more so, of the news that has been coming out from around the entirety of the world, as we have been able to hear of significant developments at this moment from the Middle East and also Eastern Europe. Inside of Eastern Europe, we have been able to see that the Ukrainian armed forces have conducted such a large and long-lasting drone attack against the capital of the Russian Federation that we are now seeing that emergency rapid deployable air defense forces are now being deployed around the outskirts of the Kremlin and are attempting to prepare an air defense in case of Ukrainian drones are able to make it all the way into the air defense perimeter at its very inner rings, near to the area of the Kremlin. We have also been able to additionally hear that within the Middle East, the United States Air Forces have been able to conduct major strikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran over the last 12 hours, causing significant damage to multiple Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps military facilities and continuing their strikes inside of Tehran. This comes as rumors have emerged that Mujtaba Khomeini, the new supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, is in fact not even inside of Iran and was airlifted to the city of Moscow for emergency medical treatment after the original strikes that occurred on the 28th of February, which saw not only Ali Khamenei killed, but also Mujtaba Khomeini has apparently, according to rumors, been heavily injured in the midst of that strike and has largely been incapacitated. At the same time, we've also seen heavy U.S. air activity around the Strait of Hormuz, with bombardments continuing on the port of Bandar Abbas and a possible U.S. naval aircraft or U.S. Air Force aircraft being seen over the area of the port of Chabahar. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been returning fire against the Gulf states and the United States of America over the course of the day. with significant explosions being reported within Bahrain at one of the airfields within the southern part of the nation state, and also within the area of the state of Israel, as a cluster round was able to make impact on a street in Tel Aviv earlier today. Additionally, we have also been able to hear that the Victory Base has been attacked and hit several more times, and we've also seen that U.S. airstrikes against pro-Iranian militias throughout the entirety of the Republic of Iraq have been ongoing throughout the day as well. We've also seen that the border skirmish between Afghanistan and Pakistan is continuing, and now the Pakistanis are beginning to use their main battle tanks to conduct direct artillery support of their infantry on the mountain ranges that the Taliban are currently still held up in, near to the area of the Khyber Pass. We've also seen with the war in Ukraine, the Ukrainian armed forces have once again slammed the Tikhorets pumping station within the Krasnodar Oblast, and we've also heard that the Belgrade thermal power plant has been hit once again. We've also gotten reports that the French will now be providing SAMP-T air defense systems, incredibly comparable to that of the MIM-104 Patriot air defense system, to the state of Ukraine to further help them defend their skies, even in the midst of the Patriot missile interceptor shortages, which are now starting to generally be heard, or at least or reverberating around the world at this moment. Before we get on into the past 12 hours of news, we actually have some breaking news that's been coming out at this moment. And Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so right now we're getting some breaking news out of Iran. We're hearing reports emerging from Iran indicating there's a nationwide shutdown of the internet services, which we did generally know about that before, but here's the new part. According to these accounts, the regime intelligence units supported by besieged forces have now initiated coordinated searches of private residences inside of Iran, and they're trying to locate individuals with Starlink equipment. So they're trying to crack down on any remaining ability for the Iranians to communicate outside of their country with anybody. And it appears to be that is just happening as of very recently. So that's a pretty big story happening right now. And we've also seen as well that apparently there are now clashes between Hezbollah and Israeli forces in southern Lebanon as well. Not really sure how big this is yet, but it appears to be some possibly isolated clashes that we're hearing about right now in southern Lebanon. So two big pieces of news right here at the very beginning.
And really quickly, to move us into the situation in southern Lebanon, it appears that there is now some sort of an active engagement between Hezbollah and Israeli forces within the city of Qayyam. I'll have to pull that one up really quickly to make sure that we can get the exact location of where that is. Depending on where it is, it'll be giving us a fairly good idea of what's going on. And it actually appears that at this moment, this may be the beginning of an IDF offensive into the area of southern Lebanon as they attempt to reach the banks of the Litani River. IDF forces most likely just left the area of Metula on the southern end of the Lebanese border and have begun to advance on the city of Qayyam, which we can see right here. It now appears that Hezbollah and IDF forces are now engaging each other on the ground in what can be described as a semi-conventional battle, and we can actually hear that in this clip right here. We hear some sporadic small arms fire in the distance.
It sounds pretty isolated for the most part.
It sounds fairly small. This is the first time, folks, that we've actually seen an Israeli direct gunfight with Hezbollah onto the border between Israel and Lebanon. The last time that we saw, well, my esophagus just collapsed right there, any sort of actions between the IDF and Hezbollah was actually near to the area of the Bekaa Valley, near to the city of Baalbek, when some form of Israeli special forces landed within the area to conduct some form of a ground operation, and that was the last time that we ever seen any major combat between the IDF and Hezbollah, which was several days ago, about more than a half week ago at this point. So it does appear that we're seeing that the Israelis may be beginning a larger, or at least a more sporadic probing of Hezbollah forces near to the southern border, and maybe beginning a ground offensive here within the near future. Or this may be the very preparatory actions for larger offensive works that may be coming within the next few hours. It's a little hard to say. We do know that the Israelis already announced that they were going to be conducting an incursion into Lebanon up to the banks of the Litani River, meaning that this could come at any point now. And considering that there's now firefights along the border, it's much more likely now than ever that those incursions may be becoming imminent. But moving us on out of all of that breaking news and on into the news that we've been able to gather over the past 24 hours, we have a significant amount of developments that we are able to cover. But really quickly, before we get on into that, I do want to say that we have a fundraiser on this live stream. and it should be showing up, and it is for the Wounded Warriors Project, which is an absolutely incredible fundraiser, which helps out wounded American veterans that have served within our armed forces, and also the family members of those who have seen that their loved ones have died in the line of service in the name of this nation. And so I hope that we can see that the fundraiser reaches a pretty decent amount. Of course, it is a midday fundraiser, and I also have to explain really quickly, folks, something else as well. This is a normal stream. It's just in the middle of the day because we have a little bit of a scheduling issue to where we have to get up at basically like 2 in the morning tomorrow to be able to go and take care of some business. And because of that, we generally can no longer run a late night stream, at least for today, because by the time we got off air, we would have to be getting up in about 1 hour and then getting ready to go and take care of the business that we have to tend to. So with that in mind, we will be running our normal stream and our normal news coverage here in the middle of the day, and we also have an absolutely incredible fundraiser for the Wounded Warriors Project. But moving us on into the major news that we've been able to get over the course of the day, we have seen that the United States Air Forces have been able to conduct a significant strike against the Islamic Republic of Iran in a larger area of the western part of the country, and we've also been able to hear of continued attacks within the central area of the Islamic Republic of Iran as well, near to the capital of Tehran. We were able to see that some significant strikes were reported within the northern part of the country, where we were able to confirm that an IRGC headquarters within the area have been directly hit and destroyed in an airstrike. We were actually able to see this in the clip right here.
Damn, son, looks like they took out the whole side of the mountain.
Dang, I mean, honestly, they were hitting them with the 2,000 pounders.
Also, is that snow back there I'm seeing on the mountains in the back, or am I imagining things?
No, that is legitimate snow. It's actually winter over there in Iran, and while they don't get a lot of water, kind of like here in the Salt Lake area, whenever the clouds pass through, they do pretty much scatter a little bit of snow onto the mountaintops in the surrounding area.
Wow, that's crazy, honestly. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I would have to say it's really something else. We've also been able to see some pretty interesting sorts of airstrikes around the area of Saqqez, as we were able to hear that a drone facility in this area had been directly hit by the Israeli Defense Forces. We can actually see such a facility right here getting hit by the IDF, which apparently, according to the IDF, housed a large number of drones. We can also see what appears to be members of the IRGC or the drone facility fleeing into the surrounding area. And we can now see the Israelis conducting secondary strikes to try and take out those personnel individually. We can then see them finding another drone warehouse and hitting it as well, attempting to try and knock out most of the remaining drone forces. At the moment, from what we understand, most of the transport-director launchers that fire off the short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles of the Islamic Republic of Iran largely are out of operation, at least at this moment. We understand that more than 90% of them have been knocked out, meaning that while Iran still has the capability of firing missiles, and we have seen that over the prior days, it is incredibly reduced compared to what they had at the very beginning of the war. However, the situation for their drone forces has been a lot different, and the drone forces in Iran have proved to be a lot more resilient, meaning that they still have a decent amount of their operational capacity intact and have still been launching major drone attacks against most allies within the region, and also U.S. forces inside of Iraq and elsewhere. For this reason, we're now seeing that a lot of the air activities are actually being diverted away from the TELs and more towards the drone facilities and drone launchers, because they are considered to be a more significant threat at this moment than, say, for example, the transport-director launchers that are at far smaller numbers. We also were able to see that some surface-to-air missile systems were hit and destroyed today, including this Hawk surface-to-air missile system, which was provided to the Islamic Republic of Iran back when it was not the Islamic Republic of Iran, and we were able to see that the damage was quite significant on that launcher. It was completely destroyed in the strike. We also were additionally able to hear of other major strikes that were conducted by the United States, as we were able to report that more air defense targets had been hit within the western area of the country. That actually appeared to be some sort of a Bofors or Oerlikon air defense gun is the best way to explain it. And then this next clip here, we actually were able to see what appears to be possibly some form of a self-propelled gun or an SPG that was set into a pre-dug position, possibly near to the Iraqi border, which was also directly hit by an airstrike as well, generally knocking out the system. We can also see them hitting more towed artillery pieces. And then finally that Hawk surface-to-air missile system that we had already shown y'all just a little while ago. The strikes appear to be pretty decent so far, at least in the amount of damage that they have been able to inflict, and we've also seen that U.S. Air Forces have conducted significant strikes on the area of Hamadan within northwestern Iran, as we were able to see that IRGC headquarters and besieged headquarters were being targeted and destroyed within the surrounding area of the city of Hamadan, which we saw in this clip right here. We can also see in the next clip as well that there were additional strikes, or more so additional footage of the explosions within Hamadan. And we also were able to hear that the telecommunications hub within Hamadan apparently was also a target as well and has been destroyed in the U.S. airstrikes just a little bit earlier. And here's the clip once again. We see the smoke rising and we hear the screaming of a large amount of chickens. Or
I guess livestock right in the middle of the capital is a little bit insane, but I guess that's normal.
I guess, maybe. I really don't know. I mean, maybe it's normal, maybe it's not. I don't really know. But still, the strikes in Hamadan were fairly significant and once again are proving to see a decent amount of damage. To give you all a little bit of an overview of the ongoing air campaigns that the United States and Iran are conducting, here's what we can largely pick up over the course of this day that seems to be the general ongoing trend, at least at the moment. It appears that the United States and Israeli air forces are conducting larger strikes on some remaining Iranian air defenses. We haven't really seen it being to any effect, but they are still largely trying to strike them and destroy them before they can cause any further damage to U.S. forces or try and attempt to stop any U.S. forces, such as their drones, from conducting low-altitude actions on the enemy forces inside of Iran. We've also seen that a lot of air activity is generally starting to shift away from the central and western regions of Iran and more towards the Strait of Hormuz, as it now has finally been considered to be a high priority within American and Israeli war planning, and really international war planning, to reopen the Strait of Hormuz as quickly as possible. Currently, we understand that crude oil prices are still lingering around pretty high numbers, and we were able to see that it's once again rapidly fluctuated over the course of the day, and is now sitting once again around $100 per barrel. We've been able to see that that's largely been the case for several days at this point, and we can once again see that the rise of the price per oil is once again meteoric generally, at least within the shorter period of time since this war has started. Because of that, the United States needs to see, generally for our strategic purposes, that the Iranian blockade on the Strait of Hormuz is lifted. It's really the only way that the Iranians have any negotiating cards to work with, and really the only way that they can get any kind of leverage as well. Really the only battles they actually can win, to be entirely honest. So we're seeing that a lot of efforts are being diverted towards this area to ensure that while the U.S. is winning every other battle, we're not losing the most important one that we can face to lose inside of the Strait of Hormuz. But a lot of people currently are talking about the larger airstrikes that we've seen so far, and the fact that Israel says that it plans 3 more weeks of war with the Islamic Republic of Iran. And a lot of people are wondering whether or not that's going to be enough time to see that the Islamic Republic of Iran has truly been defeated by 3 weeks later, which will be about a month-and-a-half long war, or if people believe that the Iranians will still be holding out and will still be attempting a dogged resistance against the war that's been ongoing so far, much to their detriment on most fronts except for the Strait of Hormuz. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so the news reports are that Israel's saying that it plans only 3 more weeks of war with Iran. So the question is, will that be enough time for Iran to be defeated, or will there be a situation that comes out of this that could expand the war even further? So 44% said no, Iran will still be standing after just 3 more weeks. 29% said yes, Iran will be defeated by then, and 11% said Israel will likely declare victory and simply call it a day, basically. So this, first of all, I'm not sure why they're telling people it's going to be 3 more weeks. It seems like not a great strategic thing to say that, and maybe they're trying to calm fears that the war is going to be a forever war possibly, but I don't think 3 more weeks is going to be enough. Unless Israel plans on declaring victory and simply walking off, then I'm really not sure what they're saying 3 more weeks for, because there's no signs right now that the Iranian government's going to collapse in just less than a month. There's no signs of that. So I think Iran likely will still be standing after 3 more weeks, and the problem will be, is Israel going to call it a day, or are they going to expand the war from that point forward? It's honestly, it's not really that hard to tell. I think Israel will clearly expand the war from that point forward. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that, in my opinion, I think that the Islamic Republic of Iran will probably be standing about 3 weeks in. It appears that the Islamic Republic of Iran has been fairly resilient, at least so far, in the strikes that have been conducted against them. And generally, a clearing of the Strait of Hormuz is going to take a little bit of time, probably a good bit longer than 3 weeks, possibly about a month or two, to see that all forces on the coast have largely been knocked out. And then, further than that, to see that the United States is then able to conduct any form of escort duties through the Strait of Hormuz. So I generally have to say that I'm with the 45%. I think the Iranians will probably still be standing by that time. And as far as a perspective of when this war is going to end, that's a little bit too optimistic. And it appears to be trying to end the conflict at a far faster rate, or at least trying to artificially state that the conflict would end at a far faster rate than it would at this moment. I think we can get a clear understanding, folks, that at this point, this war is going to be going on for some time, because the Islamic Republic of Iran has been a lot more resilient than we've expected. And while we can clear the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, I think that we're still going to see some significant elements of the Islamic regime still intact and operational, even by the time that 3 weeks has passed from now. We'll still be conducting strikes against them, and by then the picture will hopefully be a lot more optimistic, especially as far as the Strait of Hormuz is concerned. But I think that 3 weeks is just too premature of a timetable to work off of at the moment. But moving us on from that, we have been able to see that up inside of the capital of Tehran, there's been some fairly interesting developments. More besieged checkpoints have been directly targeted and hit by Israeli and U.S. air forces and drone forces, as we can see in this clip right here. And we were able to
Well, you said that was a besieged checkpoint that we just looked at right there?
From what we generally know, it was.
Interesting. So are they resorting to doing like roadside blockades or something? Is that what they're doing now? As we saw the one yesterday, they were holding one of these blockades in a tunnel and somewhere in Tehran. So it looks like they've come underground. They come out from basically underneath the ground, and now they're doing them on the streets too. That didn't work too well.
It doesn't really appear that it's going all too well. The Besiege, which is, by the way, folks, kind of like the internal armed police of the Islamic Republic of Iran, have been attempting to conduct some blockades, road blockades that is, throughout larger areas of the capital of Tehran and elsewhere. And we have seen that a large amount of these above-ground blockades have largely been hit by American-made drones, such as the Lucas drones, which has led to a decent amount of these checkpoints attempting to go underground in the tunnels that surround the city of Tehran and are also within it. We haven't really seen a great deal of success, at least at this point, with that sort of a tactic. We've seen that, one, that's greatly decreased the efficiency of the besieged to conduct these checkpoints, and secondly, any that are found above ground still appear to be getting hit, at least at this moment. But moving on from that, we've also been able to hear some other significant developments, at least concerning the supreme leader, or the new supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, as we're now hearing that Mujtaba Khamenei may not even be inside of Iran. According to U.S. intelligence, they've assessed that the Iranians' late supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, had... Well, actually, sorry, folks, I forgot. That news is actually in Moscow. I'll have to get you all to this one down in Tehran in just a moment. But getting us on up into Moscow, we have heard that it appears that Mujtaba Khamenei might not even be inside of Iran. According to some news that has come out, Iran's new supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, who vanished from public view after the U.S. and Israeli strikes, is allegedly actually in Moscow receiving medical treatment. Al Jazeera reports citing a source close to his inner circle, and he was reportedly wounded on the 28th of February, which was around the same time that Ali Khamenei, which was probably within this very same compound as Mujtaba Khamenei, was also directly hit by a large amount of missiles in the opening attacks of the war, and was outright killed by U.S. forces in that attack. So it appears that at the moment, we're getting an understanding that Mujtaba Khamenei might not even be in the country at all. And what's even more interesting is that according to Ali Khamenei, before he died, at least according to some internal sources that are a little bit familiar with the matter in U.S. intelligence, they're apparently saying that the late supreme leader Ali Khamenei had serious doubts about his son succeeding him, viewing him as unqualified and not especially capable, according to sources. Apparently, the president and other officials were briefed on this intelligence, which is giving us an idea that if Mujtaba Khamenei has been selected and that this intelligence is true, he's generally a figurehead of the country, but he's not actually the one leading it, is what we would generally assume. If Ali Khamenei had the understanding that his son was incompetent to run the country, then we could generally get the understanding that everybody else in the IRGC and elsewhere would probably view him as incompetent as well. And the only reason that he's been selected was by significant pressure of the IRGC to basically have the next in line for the throne take over control of the country publicly, while the IRGC and other elements of the Islamic regime actually run the day-to-day operations of the government and at large the ongoing war that we're seeing right now. And this has started to lead a lot of people to have questions about who in the hell is actually running the Islamic Republic of Iran right now? And people are wondering, who's actually in charge? Is it the IRGC? Is it Mujtaba Khomeini? Is it the foreign minister? Who in the world could it even be? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now? And what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so clearly Mujtaba was not a very preferred pick. Not even Mujtaba's father apparently wanted to pick him to lead. But unfortunately, though, or I guess depending on who you ask, it looks like Mujtaba is now in charge, at least according to the reports. And he's now apparently in Moscow, according to most recent data that we have, while the Iran war is raging on. So who is in charge of Iran if Mujtaba is in Russia at this point? So 61% said the IRGC is now in charge, meaning the Iranian military, while 17% said nobody is in charge, and 13% said Mujtaba is still in charge, and he's simply crippled, possibly, and also in a completely different country, running it from Russia, basically. So I would say, based on what I've heard so far, it sounds like the military is basically running the country. We've also heard that the IRGC has been given a wide range of striking capabilities. They generally don't have to check with their commanders before they start launching strikes on Israel, the Gulf states, etc. They're largely acting independent for the most part. So that does not indicate a coherent governance structure. That indicates it's fractured, which would also line up with the fact that Mujtaba is not even in Iran right now. So it's really, honestly, I'm not even really sure who's in charge at this point. We believe the military is in charge, but it's really very much decentralized at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the IRGC is clearly in charge of the situation that's ongoing on the ground inside of Iran, because we already understand that Mujtaba Khomeini has been in some sort of a coma or has been incapacitated basically the entirety of the war since the 28th of February, when he was also heavily wounded in the strikes that originally killed the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei. So that would generally give us the concept at the moment that Mujtaba Khomeini has not actually been in control of the country even after he was selected as the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So, in a sense, this guy basically is just a figurehead of the country, while the other elements of the government are actually running the show. And we would understand that out of every government institution within the Islamic Republic of Iran, it's highly likely that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is the one actually running the show. To give a little bit of a comparable sort of an outline to how this is going inside of Iran, at least how their internal government structure works, it works very similarly to any other form of an authoritarian government, to where while they have some sort of a semblance of a democratic institution that actually runs the government, they're not the ones who are actually in control. It's usually some form of a party or some sort of a group that largely insists more heavily on loyalty than public or, of course, democratic representation, and that would be the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. A very similar sort of a government principle is actually seen within the People's Republic of China, where the People's Republic of China actually has it written into their constitution that the Chinese Communist Party, no matter what, will always have primacy over any other political party, body, or institution within the entirety of the People's Republic of China. And that's largely the very same way that the Islamic Republic of Iran operates, where the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is the one that generally has held all of the power. The Iranian parliament, the Council of Experts, and generally the rest of the Iranian governmental structure doesn't really matter all that much. What really matters is the supreme leader and then his direct control over the IRGC. And at this point, now knowing that the IRGC has basically forced them to elect, or at least the Council of Experts, which is largely now dead, to elect a incapacitated supreme leader, they're the ones who pretty much have the blank check to run the country. So if we're looking towards anyone who's actually in charge of making the decisions, it would probably be the top generals and officials that are still alive within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps that are the ones making the decisions. So I'd generally say, without a doubt, the IRGC is in charge of the country, and there is no supreme leader or larger democratic representative that is actually in charge in operating the country. So with that in mind, I hope we were able to address that fairly well.
Also, by the way, jumping back to something we just got done talking about a second ago, we had heard that the Israelis are saying that the war or the attacks are going to last for about 3 more weeks. That's what the Israelis are currently saying. We just got a breaking news story right now that the Israeli government is set to approve the call-up of up to almost 500,000 reservists as the IDF prepares a potential ground operation in Lebanon. So obviously, the whole reason they're going into Lebanon is because they're trying to go in there and deal with Hezbollah, which is an Iranian proxy force. course. So essentially, they're fighting Iran inside of Lebanon. That's basically what that is. So, if that is truly what they're about to do, and they're about to call up almost 500,000 reservists, then obviously I don't think 3 more weeks is an appropriate time frame whatsoever. It's probably a lot longer than that, based on the sounds of it. So that's a pretty big piece of news right there.
And that is a pretty significant amount of news right there. It appears that the Israelis are gearing up for an incredibly long duration conflict within southern Lebanon, which at a minimum would give us an idea that this conflict is certainly not going to be ending anytime soon, because they're expecting Hezbollah to give that much resistance that they now have to raise 500,000 men in arms to be able to go into Lebanon and just hold the southern area of the country. Either this is giving us the idea that they're going to be expanding far further than the Litani River and they're going to be going a lot more north, or they're going to be inside of the southern area of Lebanon for an incredibly long period of time. Who knows how long? But outside of that, we have also been able to hear out of the Islamic Republic of Iran's government today another interesting development, which is the national shutdown of the internet, and also the fact that they're going around and arresting anyone and detaining them who appears to be in possession of some form of a Starlink transmitter or some sort of a Starlink internet connector. We've also been able to see that within the area of the coastline, the United States Air Forces have been conducting significant strikes against Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps naval facilities, including the ones at Bandar Abbas, as we were able to see some light smoke rising from the area of the port, which is suggesting that additional strikes have been conducted today near to the area of Bandar Abbas. Most interestingly, near to the area of the port of Chabahar, we also were able to see what appeared to be low-flying, possible U.S. aircraft that were conducting operations directly over the port of Chabahar, and here's one of those clips right here. That is an FA-18 Super Hornet, most likely of the USS Abraham Lincoln's Carrier Strike Group. Look at it. That's pretty wild. I mean, that thing is low enough you can physically see it pretty easily from the ground. That's also giving us the idea that we have obtained absolute air supremacy over this area, and air defenses are largely completely down, because otherwise U.S. aircraft would not get that low, that slow, and also that close to the Iranian coast where they're this easily visible. If there was even a man-pad within the area, which is a man-portable air defense system that is shoulder-fired, that would still pose a near-fatal threat to an FA-18 Super Hornet that is at that altitude. So this is largely confirming to us at the moment that the area specifically around the Gulf of Oman apparently has no evident or actual air defense threats to the U.S. Air Forces, meaning that we have been able to undeniably attain absolute air supremacy over this area of Iran within this area. This is the best proof that we could have of that. I mean, that is pretty wild. I'm not going to lie. Like an F-18 Super Hornet flying that low over a city inside of Iran. And just to show you where this is, folks, this is the city of Chabahar right here, which is what we believe it was flying over. And it was possibly flying somewhere directly into the city and then towards the right and towards the area of Chabahar port itself. And apparently facing absolutely no air defenses whatsoever during the entirety of the flight that we were seeing on that clip. Once again, confirming that air supremacy has been achieved within this area. And we would also assume by extension that all elements of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, or the Islamic Republic of Iran's Navy, within the smaller port of Konarak, which is just to the west of Chabahar, had most likely been destroyed as well, as it doesn't appear that the air defense batteries on board those smaller vessels are going to be posing a threat to U.S. Air Forces at this point either. We've also been able to see some current force dispositions within the area, and I have to give a humongous shout out to Ian Ellis, who makes these infographics, because they're high quality, and not only that, they're incredibly interesting to look at. We were actually able to see that here on this map, it shows all of the U.S.-Israeli strikes, the Iranian air defenses, and also retaliatory strikes that the Islamic Republic of Iran has conducted on U.S. forces and allied nations throughout the entirety of the region. As we can see, the U.S. force disposition within the area is quite significant. With the USS Gerald R. Ford, it currently has 4 Arleigh Burke-class destroyer escorts as a part of its carrier strike group, and the Lincoln has about 3. They also have the significant air elements on board the Gerald R. Ford and the Lincoln, which have been conducting airstrikes over about the past 3 weeks at this point. And we also see that on board the, well, actually not on board, but at the U.S. air bases throughout the region, or at least the foreign bases that are based facing U.S. forces, we were able to see that, of course, there are a significant number of F-15s, F-16s, and F-35s, along with some F-22s at places like the Avda Air Base, which have been conducting air operations in support of Allied forces within the region, or have been conducting offensive attacks against the Islamic Republic of Iran in hopes to knock out further assets. We also understand that 5th Fleet and 6th Fleet do have a decent amount of Arleigh Burkes that are detached from any form of a carrier strike group duty and are conducting their own separate actions against the Islamic Republic of Iran, and there is a decent number of fleet auxiliaries and support vessels within the area, which is significantly helping with ensuring that the tempo of operations is uninterrupted and is seamless at this moment. We've also been able to hear of the strikes, of course, by analysis map that were conducted by the B-2s and B-1 Lancers, which are generally operating all the way, in some instances, from Whiteman Air Force Base and Dyes Air Force Base in Missouri and Texas, although we've also been able to hear that several B-1 Lancers have actually been relocated to RAF Fairford within the United Kingdom, which is allowing those Lancers in particular to be able to keep up a higher tempo of strikes, considering that the flight time and the rate of exhaustion for the crews is being significantly reduced due to the shorter range that those Lancers are having to fly to reach the area of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Generally, at this point, the operation is going fairly well. The only thing that is still the crisis point, if we want to call it that, is the Strait of Hormuz, but considering that we're now seeing active concerted efforts to try and deal with the Strait of Hormuz and to eventually demine it and reopen civilian traffic flowing through the area, hopefully we'll be able to see that a general crisis can be averted before it becomes an even larger and more considerable issue. We've also been able to hear some other news within the Middle East. To get us through this really quickly, we do have to talk about the strikes that have either been conducted on pro-Iranian forces within the area, or the direct strikes the Islamic Republic of Iran has conducted on allied and coalition forces within the region. First off, we were able to hear that in the northern Iranian city of Kirkuk, it appears that pro-IRGC-backed militias were getting hit pretty heavily by U.S. and Israeli airstrikes. I'm going to have to mute that. That actually threw me off. I thought someone was talking in the room. I was like, what the hell? But here's the clip of the facilities burning in the distance after the successful U.S. airstrikes. We have also able to see in this clip as well the additional fires that were burning around the area of Kirkuk.
Looks troublesome.
It certainly does look troublesome. Moving on from that clip and on down into Baghdad, we also were able to confirm that there were explosions that had occurred within the Baghdad area as well. These are actually unknown at the moment. We're not sure if these were strikes on pro-Iranian militias or if these were Iranian strikes on former U.S. bases within the area, but we were able to see them right here. And that's the end of that clip. Not really a long one, but still showing us some sort of an explosion. There's also an ongoing fire at the Victory Base, and once again, we believe that this was caused by the prior Iranian attack from yesterday from a pro-Iranian militia, which we actually covered on air only about 12 hours ago. We see the fire continuing to burn on the facility as the bystanders here spectate about the fire that's apparently burning down an entire structure at the Victory Base.
This guy's going off right here.
This guy is dropping a mixtape. We see them continuing to look at the fire as it burns, but once again confirming another attack on the Victory Base that appears to have been successful. Moving on from that clip and on out of the area of Baghdad, we've also been able to report that it appears that an airbase within southern Bahrain was also hit and damaged, as well as the Sheikh Isa, or the Sheikh Isa Air Force Base in Bahrain, was apparently hit this morning, starting a fire within the vicinity of the facility. And to show you all this airbase really quickly, this is the Sheikh Isa Air Base right here. From what we understand, we do not believe that a larger portion of U.S. Air Forces have been stationed here or have even been operating here at all. So this appears to be a direct attack upon the Bahrainian Air Force that has generally been operating out of this airstrip. We've actually been able to largely confirm that most, if not all, U.S. air elements were pre-evacuated from Bahrain and Qatar before the war started, meaning that if there are any U.S. aircraft within this area, it's most likely smaller transports, those of lower, I guess you could say, priorities, like C-130s and MV-22 Ospreys, that would be operating from these airfields, because there are some U.S. skeletal crews still operating in Qatar and Bahrain, but to no large degree. degree, meaning that this hit on this airbase would not be resulting in any combat aviation losses or support aircraft losses that would be critical to the function of U.S. forces within this region. We've also been able to see some additional developments as well outside of Bahrain, where we were able to see that within the area of Israel, it does appear that Iranian cluster rounds fired off of their missiles, or Karam Shahers, are still proving to be somewhat dangerous to the Israeli citizenry on the ground, as we were able to see a cluster bomb explode within a street in Tel Aviv right here. And there was the direct explosion in the street, and we can see that civilians were incredibly close nearby to that explosion. These sorts of uses of cluster bombs within the conflict so far have truly proven to be what can only be described as a violation of the rules of war and also the Geneva Convention. Most, if not all, iterations of the modern-day Geneva Convention completely forbade the use of cluster rounds and cluster munitions on populated areas where civilians may be present. If a cluster munition is legal to be used, it is only legal to be used in scenarios where it is a rural area and there are absolutely no civilians present within the region, meaning that they've been pre-evacuated. The use of cluster rounds by the Islamic Republic of Iran, not only on Israel but other countries throughout the region, is generally showing us that the Islamic Republic of Iran is still operating as we generally would know they would, which is as a terrorist state, as they proudly admit that these sorts of cluster rounds are being used against their enemies within the region, which is openly admitting to a violation of international law. But moving on from that, we've also been able to hear of some other news, not inside of the war between Iran and, well, actually, between Iran and the Middle East. I had to make sure I got that correct there. I was about to say Iraq. That's why I had to go sorry and then correct myself. But we've also been able to hear that the war in Ukraine is generally becoming a little bit difficult, especially for the Russians, to try and continue to fight. But before we get on into that, we have been able to hear that Iran has admitted today that Russia and China has been providing their nation with military intelligence, which generally seems to be putting the whole statement that the special envoy of the United States stated that the Russians said they're not sharing military intelligence with Iran and we can trust them, kind of on its head. We generally couldn't trust the Russians, and it appears that the Iranians, which we can't really trust either, have at least openly admitted that our enemies are continuing to help support Iran in every conceivable way that they can. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are people thinking can be done about it?
Okay, so Iran is now claiming that both China and Russia are providing military aid and information. So what can be done about it? Also, by the way, that's not shocking. We knew that was the case. So we didn't have to hear it from the horse's mouth. We could see that with our own eyes. But 49% said we can simply help Ukraine escalate on Russia as retaliation, while 28% said nothing can really be done, and 16% said we can start confronting China and Russia directly, perhaps even militarily. So this one here is a little bit of a catch-22, because we did know, like I just mentioned, that China and Russia are providing military aid. We've seen Russia provide helicopters, missiles, and drones. We've even seen some of the drones crashing on, like, for example, the territory of Cyprus, having Russian-made parts in the drone. So that's a pretty clear sign that they're getting help. Also, China is apparently providing a hell of a lot of intelligence for targeting data to Iran as well. So what can be done about it? Honestly, not a whole bunch, really. That's the problem. We have been helping Ukraine escalate on Russia for quite some time, but there's also another problem. The U.S. just lifted sanctions on Russia and is now letting Russia basically fund the war against Ukraine by raising the oil sanctions. So we've really done the opposite of escalating. We've actually de-escalated with Russia to a large extent, which is only going to hurt U.S. national security and also hurt Ukraine's security as well. So that's certainly not a good move. Now, confronting China directly and Russia as well, that could be very dangerous, because even though we want to, obviously retaliate against the situation, we don't want to start a World War III scenario where we go into a direct war with China or Russia. That would be quite devastating just to counter some military aid. So I'm going to say, generally speaking, we should probably escalate, but that's not what we're seeing right now from the United States toward Ukraine and Russia. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that we certainly need to react in some way or form, but I think that a direct war with both of those parties would be a fairly unwise idea. Generally, we want to let the Russians make the first move in Europe and be prepared to react as soon as possible once we believe that that sort of offensive action by Russia would be imminent. And we also want to try and put China in the most disadvantageous advantageous position possible. The reason why they're doing this right now is because they want to try and screw over the United States as much as they can without directly fighting us, because they also know that that would be equally destructive to themselves as it would be to us. So for that reason, we need to try and find ways to get back at those two countries without directly attacking them. And the best way to do that would be to provide significant military support to the state of Ukraine to be able to see that they're able to even ramp up farther their attacks on the Russian Federation and continue to see that their economy is worsened. It would also be smart to see that sanctions are re-implemented and there is no pause on the sanctions so far for the Russian Federation to ensure that their oil companies continue to collapse, which is the monolithic economic structure of the Russian economy. And we also need to see that we continue to arm and provide equipment and weapons to Taiwan, so that way Taiwan becomes largely a bristling porcupine in the Philippine Sea instead of being a quick walk in the park for the Chinese to try and take care of and deal with. That would generally be the best way for us to deal with these countries, is by thwarting their own foreign policy and grander strategy initiatives, by screwing over the Russians in the Ukraine war, and also making it even more difficult for China to consider the attempted capture of Taiwan to be something that would be fairly easy. So I would generally say that I would be well within the large majority that voted on that poll. I think that we do need to get back at them in some ways, but I don't think any sort of direct military action would be a wise idea, because while it would certainly destroy Russia or China, it's highly likely that we would be destroyed in the process as well. And while we do want to defeat our enemies, we want to be around and living to be able to celebrate the victory once we're able to achieve some sort of a strategic success against our enemies around the world. But moving on from that, we've also been able to get some...
Also, don't mean to interrupt there, but just real quick though, I want to give a quick shout out. The fundraiser is currently sitting at just shy of $1,300 raised right now. So I think, roughly speaking, I think we're just about halfway to the goal. Just about. I think we're about halfway there. I can't really do that math in my head that easy. I'm looking at the progress bar and I'm trying to do the geometry here. Will that blue progress bar double it possibly? I'm not really sure, but that is fantastic work right there. So if you haven't already, please feel free to donate. It does help the Wounded Warrior Project, which is a very good charity, by the way, and we do appreciate that generosity toward the fundraiser.
And I'd have to say, it's absolutely incredible to see that we've raised $1,300 in the middle of the day, which is just $50 over the halfway mark of getting to the fundraiser goal of $2.5 thousand raised for Wounded Warriors Project, which is absolutely incredible to see. And hopefully we'll be able to see that we are able to get to that $2.5 thousand goal, because the Leaf Spring Army has never missed a fundraiser goal in history. And we're actually coming off of the success of last weekend, where we were able to raise over $23,000 for the Wounded Warriors Project, which is an absolutely incredible nonprofit, which helps out the American soldiers that have returned from overseas wounded, and also helps out the family members of those whose family members in the armed forces made the ultimate sacrifice and died in the name of this country to see that our country would hopefully be able to succeed and prosper for an even longer period of time. So hopefully we'll be able to see that people get us up to the fundraiser goal of $2.5 thousand raised, because Wounded Warriors Project is an absolutely incredible fundraiser and is helping out a lot of wounded U.S. soldiers who have given next to everything, and in some cases have given everything, to see that this nation will be able to continue to stay on top. But moving on out of the Middle East for a moment, I want to move you all over to a very small update between Pakistan and the Taliban. The Pakistan-Taliban border war has been going on longer than the Middle East war at this moment, and we have not really been able to give it any coverage at all. But one thing that I can tell you is that Pakistan, much like the United States, has really been able to achieve air superiority, air supremacy as a matter of fact, over its adversaries, and have been able to conduct significant actions and damage against the Taliban. From what we understand, Taliban border guard forces have been on the back foot the entirety of the conflict ever since the third hour of the war, and we're about a month into it now, meaning that they've been on the back foot for about 99% of the time that this conflict has been going. We were able to see today that the Pakistanis have actually rolled forward some of their older main battle tanks to conduct direct bombardments on Taliban border posts that are in the distance. And here's that clip. When you see the tank firing, and we can also see the direct impact on the hillside in the distance on the small Taliban outpost near to the border. We understand that the main strategy right now by the Pakistanis was that after they conducted incursions into Afghanistan and have created a very thin sanitary zone over most of the area, which means that they've basically created like this neutral zone where they're at, where the Taliban can be, to where the Taliban isn't able to conduct attacks directly across the border into Pakistan proper and wound citizens of Pakistan. We're now seeing that the remaining border outposts are generally being directed, well, having fire directed onto them. That is causing significant damage to the military facilities, and not only that, the larger Taliban forces that are still within the area. We've also seen that the Pakistani Air Force has been conducting some pretty significant strikes on the Taliban forces throughout the entirety of the country, and generally at this point, we're also seeing that the Taliban has been suffering from some significant internal political strife, as multiple different factions, clans, and families have actually been fighting each other in the midst of this conflict, meaning that the Taliban is largely just, for the Pakistanis at this point, shooting fish in a barrel, and they're well in control of the situation. The war technically is still ongoing, but to be entirely frank with y'all, it's no longer a war. It's basically just a turkey shoot for the Pakistanis against any Taliban forces that they're able to spot in the distance. Now, moving us on out of Central Asia and the Middle East, it's time for us to get on up and into Ukraine, because we have had some very interesting news coming out of Ukraine over the course of the past 12 hours. We were able to cover last night that a larger drone attack had been conducted against the Russian Federation, and as a matter of fact, it had been the largest one on record for this year, and a significant amount of Ukrainian drones were actually starting to make it well within the Russian air defense perimeter before they were getting shot down. We've actually been able to hear as of today that these drone attacks have been not only the largest, but also the longest lasting so far. Ukraine has been conducting the most powerful drone attack on Moscow since the beginning of the year for over 24 hours. In the vicinity of the capital, 105 drones have already been destroyed. Mayor Sergei Sobyanin reported that the air defense forces shot down 3 more drones flying towards the city. Due to the drone threat, restrictions have once again been introduced at Vuknovo and the Sheremetyevo airports. The Vuknovo and Sheremetyevo airports are some of the most significant around the Russian metropolitan, the Moscow city area, and we are actually be able to show you all here the Zhukovsky International Airport, and more importantly, the Sheremetyevo Alexander S. Pushkin International Airport, which makes up the majority of Russia's international and domestic flights. You can actually see the size of these airport terminals right here, once again suggesting the sheer scale of the Sheremetyevo airport. We have also been able to report that the situation has gotten really bad. We're understanding now the Ukrainian drones aren't just making it through the outer air defense perimeter, they're now making it well within the third ring road, which is literally the Moscow city area. Now, there's a little bit of a difference here, and this is something interesting. There are actually 2 Moscows, for all intents and purposes, in Russia. There is the Moscow Oblast, and then there's the Moscow City Special Administrative Region. This is the Moscow Oblast here, and this includes places like Sergei Posad, Dubna, and so on. Technically Moscow, but it's only Moscow in name. Those are basically the outskirts or the gates to the larger Moscow area. Once we get into this area here, which you can kind of see the dotted line for a little bit, this is actually the Moscow Special Administrative Region, which kind of falls under the similar premise to Washington, D.C. here in the United States, but generally Moscow is a lot more important to Russia than Washington, D.C. is here in the United States. Unlike Washington, D.C., Moscow accounts for 10% of the entire Russian population, meaning that 1 in every 10 Russians live in Moscow. You can't find anything like that here in the United States. The largest city we have in the United States is New York City, which hovers around, I believe at this point, it's like 10 million people, which is about 0.3% of the U.S. population in a singular city, if I'm not mistaken, or it's like 3% or so. It's a wildly small margin, especially compared to a city like Moscow or other cities inside of Europe like Paris and London, which make up the large, pretty decent chunk of the population within those countries. We've been able to see that those citizens have been fairly concerned because they just keep watching each drone coming in, and one after the other, these drones are getting a little bit closer to the Kremlin. And here's one of those clips showing us from well within the actual city of Moscow, one of the drones flying over and either getting shot down or hitting some sort of a target within the area.
Oh.
What?
Oh man. I think that one almost got the gremlin.
I think it almost did, but we can also see a fire that was caused in the distance either by a direct impact or a shoot down as well in this clip right here. And we also were able to see in this clip.
Well, they're zooming into something. This is really, look at this advanced tech zooming in. Oh my God.
I don't know what that hit.
That's why they zoomed in. They zoomed in to show you that little zoomer hidden in.
Man, I got to. Oh yeah, I forgot we have one more clip actually, folks. I have to show you this one. There's a picture of a plume of smoke from one of the drones that was shot down by the Moscow air defense perimeter. But notice, folks, it's getting well within the urban area by this point. The situation is getting so bad, and I've never seen anything like this, but we actually have never seen anything like this before, folks, that the Moscow air defense perimeter is actually getting almost completely overwhelmed. And a lot of these drones are making it almost within the area of the Prospekt Skoho district right about here. And we've even seen some of them around the area of Dudkino here as well. To give you all an idea, a ballpark idea of how close it is to the Kremlin, these drones are getting to about 10 miles away from the Kremlin. So that means that over the next 3 minutes of flight or so, or even less, they would actually be able to reach the Kremlin area and the very inner ring road of Moscow, which you can see right here. This means that they are actually, funnily enough, let me see here. Let me measure that one out. That means that at the closest, they're getting about 7 miles away from the Ministry of Defense building. So this, to give you all a little bit of comparison, would be like us going to war with Iran, and Iranian drones are flying towards Washington, D.C., and they're only about 5 miles away from the Pentagon, and about 8 miles away from the White House or the Capitol building. Let me show you all where that would be in reality if this was a fairly similar sort of an event happening here in the U.S. So if they were coming in from, say, the coast, right now, that means that the Pentagon would be about that far away. It would be around the area of National Harbor, so anyone who's familiar with that area near Washington, D.C., can kind of get a good idea of how close these are getting before they're getting shot down. And funnily enough, it pretty much is the very same distance from that area around Washington to the White House or the Capitol building. So that ought to be giving all an idea how damn close these drones are getting to actually getting to the Kremlin. Let me put this in another perspective, folks. 7 miles or 9 miles or so. Let's go to New York City. And let's look at the Empire State Building. To give you a lot of our New Yorkers, because that's actually our largest viewership percentage of all of our viewers in the United States, let's give you all an idea of distance and range in which these attacks are making it before they're shot down. Right now, these drones are making it over the area of Richmond Hill and Ridgewood and are getting shot down. That's how close they're getting to the key seat of Russian power within the Russian Federation, which is the Kremlin. It's gotten so bad, it's gotten so horrendous that the Russian Ministry of Defense has actually mobilized emergency air defense forces and are deploying them around the Kremlin. And when I mean emergency air defenses, they're emergency in every way. I mean, every conceivable way. They're not even advanced. We are seeing that they are now deploying truck-based technicals outside of the Kremlin. Here's one of them that was just rapidly deployed this morning. So that way, if the drones make it all the way through, because they're looking like with how long this attack is going and how many drones are coming in, they might overwhelm Russian air defenses and make it all the way to the Kremlin. They're now deploying Russians with what appears to be PKP Pechniks on the back of trucks and hoping that that will be their last line of defense to drones that are attempting to come in and hit places like the Kremlin and other major governmental buildings. In short, this is getting pretty bad. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is looking near disastrous for the Russian Federation. While we're incredibly used to drones and missiles slamming down most everywhere in Kyiv, the fact that the Russian air defense perimeter is one of the few air defense perimeters in Russia that has been resilient and has largely seen that very little, if any, attacks have been able to make it in the city of Moscow is failing isn't really a good sign for the Russians. They only have two, and I mean two, decent air defense parameters. The one near the Kerch Bridge in Crimea, and the one in Moscow. That's not including all of Putin's mansions, which have absolutely superb air defense networks around them. But a lot of people are wondering what's going on with that, and a lot of people are also wondering what's going on with these guys around the Kremlin. I mean, you know, we were hearing that they're being deployed there because generally the air defenses are getting overwhelmed, and maybe so, but this is also coming in the midst of fears that a greater coup could be conducted, or attempted at least, by the Russian Federation's armed forces. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that currently, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay. Oh my God. Look at that. Traveling Tramps just put in a $1,000 donation. Look at that. That is crazy. Oh, we have hit the goal. Look at that. Hey, goal. Hey, Igor. Wait, man, I'll tell you what, that's crazy right there. Oh, by the way. Also, by the way, huge shout out to Traveling Tramps. That is crazy right there. $1,000 support to Wounded Warriors Project. That
we hit the
goal right there.
We
hit the goal. Hit the goal.
Hey, I had to check. I'm sorry, I don't have the window up. I had to go look at my phone.
You're about 30 seconds late.
Man, I'm a little late. I'm a little late, but not as late as Internet Explorer. That's like a whole other level of late. But beyond that, I gotta say a humongous shout out to Traveling Tramps who just threw in $1,000 donation, and it's also incredible to see that we have been able to hit the fundraiser goal, folks, in the middle of the day. I gotta say that we're entirely honored and amazingly appreciative to know that so many amazing folks with humongous hearts in the Lee Spring Army are helping out the Wounded Warriors Project because they do amazing work for those soldiers of the armed forces here within the United States that either are wounded or lay down their lives in the service of the Republic. And I think that it's an absolutely incredible and fantastic thing to see that so many people have supported this fundraiser once again today and have once again been able to hopefully help out a veteran out there somewhere who needs the help, or the family members of those who will never return from over there, as they call it. So a humongous thanks to y'all once again for that incredible support. And with that, Matthew, please take it back away.
Okay, so jumping back into our poll here, after we've blown away the goal at this point, thanks to a whole bunch of top donors tonight, by the way, or actually not tonight, but this evening. It's not tonight yet. I'm so used to that. But we are now at $2,800 raised at a $2,500 goal. Absolutely fantastic, by the way. And a huge shout out to everybody once again for helping us to reach well over that goal by now. Also, jumping right back to the poll, we are seeing that mobile fire groups have been spotted in Moscow near the Kremlin. So what is actually going on? That's the question, because obviously this is a rare sight to see the mobile technicals literally right around the seat of governance for the Russian Federation. 54% said coup fears are escalating, while 27% said it's emergency drone defense, and about 10% said it seems like something odd. And I would say generally, I think this is because of the major drone attack. This is basically a last line of defense for the Kremlin if these drones start getting too close. And that's what's exactly happening right now. The drones are getting too close, and the Russian air defense is getting overwhelmed. So I don't think it's necessarily directly related to coup fears. That situation is brewing on its own, off to the side. It's still a situation happening, but I think the technicals being deployed around the Kremlin are specifically about the drone defense. I think that's what that is. So I'm actually with the 27%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I had to be well within the 27%. This is clearly emergency drone defense because at the timing at which these guys are being deployed, it's literally coming in the midst of the drone raids that are making it closer and closer to the Kremlin. And I have to point out how bad this is getting. Usually we see that drones are shot down near Podolsk, like somewhere around here, or somewhere around the A107. So let me show y'all how far that is from Moscow, or the Kremlin more so. That is about 32 miles away from the Kremlin, which is about the length of Salt Lake City from north to south. Actually, that's actually kind of crazy to think about, Matthew. Like, Salt Lake City is actually kind of a big area. But outside of that, though, if we get the drones to where they are about right now, they're only about 9 miles away from the Kremlin. So they've been able to make it, by the time they're getting shot down now, through about 60% of the air defense perimeter to the Kremlin. So this is getting incredibly dangerous. And this is from the opening moments of the attack last night that we were reporting, where we saw that they were making it to about 30 miles out here near to the A105, and now they're making it well into about only 9 miles away from the Kremlin. So they are getting incredibly close. If this keeps up, it could be within the next 12 hours that drones are flying over the Kremlin. And that's why we're seeing that these emergency air defenses are being deployed. Now, are Ukrainian drones going to make it over the Kremlin? We don't really know, and generally we could see that this attack peters out before they're actually able to push them all the way to the Kremlin. We may see, however, that Russian air defenses peter out before the Ukrainian attack does, and then drones are actually able to make it towards the Kremlin. Yeah. I also, by the way, before we get on into anything else, I do have to point out, folks, they're not going to hit the Kremlin. If they do, it's going to be superficial hits, because it wouldn't be good to hit a seat of government generally.
Also, by the way, I thought the Kremlin had like advanced air defense around it. I thought it did. So it's kind of strange they're deploying like these sort of like low-tech machine gun technicals around the Kremlin, considering that they're supposed to have state-of-the-art air defense around it. That's a little bit strange. I wonder if that indicates that the Russians have been lying about the air defenses around the Kremlin, which I'm not sure if I believe that, because obviously Putin, he's very careful about putting air defense around the places that he lives in. So, I mean, what's up with that?
I don't know. That's a really interesting question. I do have to say, though, speaking of like higher end air defenses, I mean, you know, we've seen enough of the war that Pantsir S1s are not top end air defense. But the Ministry of Defense did put 2 Pantsir S1s on the rooftop of the MOD building a while ago, and they've been there for a minute now. So, I mean, there's that air defense. but it doesn't really count for anything because, as we've seen, folks, over 4 years, the Pantsir's radar is incredibly crude and can hardly pick up anything. So if it has a chance of seeing a Ukrainian drone, that's a shot in hell that it would ever see an incoming Ukrainian drone. Chances are fairly high that it won't. So I would say that I don't really know. I guess the Kremlin probably doesn't have any real air defenses around it. I mean, truth be told, in reality, folks, the Kremlin is more so a symbolic seat of the government in Russia than it is a legitimate seat of the government. The Sinetsky Dvorets building, Dvorets building right here, is really the only one that actually kind of is a little important because this is where, well, this isn't even really where the Duma sessions are held, but it's a fairly important building for usual government proceedings within the Kremlin. But the more important building to talk about would be the White House, which I'd have to go pull up for y'all really quickly. Let's see. Russian Duma building. Let me go pull this one up for y'all and show it here really quickly. This is the State Duma building, and let me go show it to y'all right here. Some of y'all are probably going to be really familiar with this building, but here it is, or here it is from this angle on the other side of the building. A lot of y'all are going to know this one because back in 1993, Boris Yeltsin actually had the Russian Duma shelled, literally bombarded by the Russian army because they were attempting to reform the Soviet Union, and he absolutely refused to give up power back to the communists. So he actually ended up having the building bombarded. Let me go see if I can show y'all Russian Duma building under siege from 1993. Here you go. There's the very same building back in 1993 with the Russian army storming the building. I mean, it was absolutely an insane time in early Russian history. Well, early modern Russian history, but still showing us prior time. And generally, that's really the seat of like symbolic power, but we all know Putin runs the show, and that means that building's also unimportant as well. So it's really more so Putin's dachas and residences that are really the high priority targets. The Kremlin is more so a symbolic one. But with that, we've actually been getting some breaking news at this moment of some sort of an aerial incursion over Turkey. And Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so right now we're seeing an unidentified object over Turkish airspace. It appears to be either a missile or, I mean, it's always possible it could be some type of space object, like a meteor or something. But there's some music sounds like there. But
Yeah.
apparently it's near Yasak, apparently in Turkey, and this is where it's being spotted from. So I'll be honest, I'm not really entirely sure. I mean, considering that Turkey's been attacked 3 times so far by Iran with missiles, we can't rule that out. But it also has the general like streak of a meteor or something of that nature. But it is persisting for quite some time. So I don't know. I'm a little bit on the fence about whether or not this is a space object or a missile. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it could be anything. I mean, also, to make it very mundane, this could just be an incoming meteor that's burning in the atmosphere. Like, it could have really be anything. I mean, honestly, to just be frank with y'all, I mean, the trail of this thing as it's coming in, I mean, that would generally suggest some sort of a meteor possibly that we're seeing over the skies of Turkey. But I do have to admit, folks, this does look a lot like an Iranian missile. I mean, like, Iranian missiles look a lot like shooting stars, so it could be. But generally, folks, I'd be honest with y'all, in my honest opinion, this looks like a meteor or maybe an incoming Iranian missile. But let's take a look at where it is. They said it was in USAC, or a USAC.
I think generally speaking, if you're seeing shooting stars, that could mean that you're living in the hood. Possibly, that could mean that because if you look up and you see shooting stars, I mean that doesn't sound like a good neighborhood.
Man, I mean, straight up, blood. I mean, like, really. But beyond that, though, USAC is way over in the western side of Anatolia. Very highly likely at this point a shooting star because we've only seen Iranian missiles make it across the Turkish border near to Iskenderun and Adana, and also the area around the city of Osmaniye. So that means that this is most likely a meteor. This town also looks very picturesque, by the way. That's actually really nice looking. Look at that. I mean, that's like quite picturesque, and they have this cool statue here of Ottoman soldiers. I don't know of what historical period, but let's take a look. Huh. I don't know what the statue is supposed to actually represent, unfortunately, folks. I don't know what historic moment that would be. But I mean, I'm not gonna lie, man. Like this little town has a railroad. I mean, like this town is not bad. Like shooting star and all. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. But not really a big incident, folks. Most likely a meteor. I mean, there's no way an Iranian missile made it that far into Turkey. And if it did at that altitude, we need to start getting a little bit more concerned about what the hell Iran's doing, because that thing is definitely going over Turkey and somewhere into the Balkans. Man, they're about to make the Serbs really crash out, bro. Like, they're about to get the Serbs to start tweaking, really.
Yeah, and also, by the way, typically speaking, whenever we've seen any of the prior attacks on Turkey with Iranian missiles, we'll usually get the footage along with a Turkish statement pretty quickly because usually by the time the footage comes out, because I'd imagine this probably happened half an hour ago, because usually that's the timeline before we get footage, then we would have had a statement from Turkey by now. So the fact we don't have one indicates it's probably some type of space debris or space object like a comet or meteor or something like that, possibly. That could be what this is because we've not gotten any statements yet as to what this is.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I would say highly likely a meteor at this point. I think that's what it is. But moving us on out of that little bit of news in Turkey and moving us back on up into Russia. As y'all can all tell, the Russian air defense perimeter isn't doing too well. But once again, folks, I have to tell y'all, the Ukrainians are not going to blow up the Kremlin. They're probably not even going to hit it. The only time we've ever seen them actually detonate some sort of an explosive on the Kremlin was directly over the dome of the Sinetsky Dvorets building, where they blew the Russian flag off of its flag post at the top of this dome on the building right here. But we have never seen the Ukrainians legitimately go after, target, and destroy the Kremlin. And to be entirely honest with y'all, it wouldn't be a good idea. For one, attacking a seat of government building is never a good idea. It doesn't really look that good. We did it in Iran, but our excuse for that is that Iran is a terrorist state. So far, we haven't seen the Russian Federation directly hit, from what I've understood, any central Ukrainian governmental buildings, which is showing some, like a minimal amount of restraint on the Russians' end. So it generally wouldn't be a good idea for the Ukrainians to hit the Kremlin, because if they hit the Kremlin, they're now opening up all the central Ukrainian governmental buildings to attacks from the Russians, and the Russians will probably start to do that immediately afterwards. And not only that, I mean, just to be entirely honest with y'all, I know that we are all not big fans of the Russian Federation, but the Kremlin is a historic location and an UNESCO World Heritage Site because of its historic significance and its significance visually to everybody in the world. I mean, everybody knows what the Kremlin is. It's like the U.S. Capitol building, the White House, or Notre Dame within Paris. So I don't really think it would be a good idea to hit the Kremlin for a multitude of reasons. So they'll probably just bypass it and go hit something else within the area instead that actually has legitimate wartime value, say a manufactory or something else along those lines. But with that, it is time for us to actually move on out of Moscow and on into the southern region of Russia. We're going back to Tikhoretsk. Back to the city of light, as we call it. The city of Tikhoretsk has already been hit several days ago and had significant damage caused to the oil pumping station, which you can see right here. The Ukrainians have just decided to hit the damn thing again, and it was quite successful. Here's the clip. Those air raid sirens. Oh, and he says that 3 have already hit the facility. But you kind of see the smoke rising out there, and then the audio cuts out on the video. And then we can see a still image of the Tikhoretsk oil pumping facility on fire again. What a tragedy. What a shame. Isn't that just unfortunate?
That is awful. Yeah. Also, by the way, I'm trying to do some breaking news scanning right now. I wasn't sure what that pause was about.
I was sitting there thinking, I was like, I haven't heard Matthew talk in a minute. I was like, did Discord just boot him off? That's why I stopped talking. I was like, is he still around? Matthew, are you alive? But
since we took a pause, though, I do have some breaking news coming out right now in the meantime. I was trying to investigate this to make sure it was the case, but we are hearing that apparently the IRGC has issued evacuation warnings for specific areas in Doha, Qatar, and Dubai in the UAE. So it looks like they're going for it again. They're going for those Gulf states once again, and I won't name the specific locations which they're stating right now. I'll leave that sort of for wide open for now. I don't want to, say something ends up being not necessarily true, because obviously this is a very serious situation. So for the folks that may be listening that are in Qatar or the United Arab Emirates, of course, refer to your government officials before you listen to us about something that it comes down to life and death, like something like this. But it looks like Iran is planning on attacking Qatar and the UAE once again, and that appears to be what we're about to see here shortly, apparently. So that's apparently a pretty big story right there. Also, I'm going to let you take over, Enforcer. I'm trying to do some research on one other thing as well, but I got to confirm it real quick.
Also, by the way, speaking of some interesting developments here, at least in Taiwan for a moment, we've actually been able to see that Taiwan has put out an official picture of the recent exercises, their urban counterattack exercises that they conducted just yesterday with the 582nd and the 584th Combined Arms Brigades. And I'm not going to lie, the picture goes hard. I mean, like, this is actually really cool looking, and it's showing a large amount of the tankers of the 542nd and 584th Combined Armed Brigades with their brand new M1A2T Abrams.
Damn. North Korea's gotten good with their propaganda. It's like been upgraded to the
Taiwan.
21st century. Say what?
This is Taiwan.
Oh, damn, man. They got honestly, it looks very reminiscent of North Korean propaganda. I'm not going to lie.
Oh,
I
man.
looked up. I didn't hear what you were saying. I looked up. I was like, oh, wow, look, North Korea's really upgraded. They must have got the new Photoshop or something. That's impressive.
Right, you looked up and said, man, blood's got on them fine things, blood. It's like, no.
I was like,
It's
damn,
like, this is
how'd
the Taiwanese.
I was like, how'd they get access to the new software? That's incredible.
I mean, honestly, it kind of does look a little North Korean, like kind of like the older retro style to the text and like how it's presented and stuff on screen. It does have a bit of a retro look to it. I'm not gonna lie though, I really kind of like this. Like, I think it goes hard. It looks really cool, and I think it's really cool that they have all of their tankers, posing like badasses. They got the M1A2Ts behind them. Also, by the way, a little fun fact for y'all know, the M1A2T is probably one of the rarest variants of the Abrams out there in actual field service. The Taiwanese are the only ones to get it, and that's what the T stands for in its designation. It is the M1A2 Taiwan export variant. That's what the T stands for. There's only about 50 of them, and I believe that the Taiwanese are trying to get their hands on some more in purchasing them from the United States and having them converted to the export variants for Taiwan. But it really cool looking. I gotta say, that's really neat, and it's great to know that the Taiwanese are once again showing to us and the public in Taiwan that they are working as hard as they can to make sure that they are capable and prepared to be able to defend their island nation from any threats from abroad, including that from the People's Republic of China. We've also been able to hear, by the way, folks, that the Ministry of Defense of Taiwan has also planned to integrate the first domestically produced regional air defense systems by next year. This includes the Tiancong 3, the Tiancong 4, and the Landsword 2. They'll also be integrated with the Patriot and NASAM systems that they're planning on purchasing from the United States soon. So Taiwan is going all in on trying to be as prepared as possible for the defense of their island once the Communist Chinese attempt to try and conduct some form of a forceful invasion, which we're believing is going to be happening soon. So fairly positive developments out of Taiwan right now, and I hope that we can see that the United States continues to develop and grow the combat capabilities defensively of Taiwan, because if they can make themselves a porcupine in the sea, in a sense, with anti-ship missiles and anti-air missiles, and also other amounts of more robust air defenses dealing with one-way attack drones, we'll see that they're going to be pretty well off to try and defend themselves for as long as possible, or make themselves so difficult to invade, the Chinese might decide to hold it off for several more years. But moving on from that, we've also been able to get a little bit more news out of Ukraine. We were able to hear today that it appears that the Belgorod thermal power plant got hit again, and this time we got the footage of the plant when it was hit. So here's the clip.
Охуеть! Куда мы попали? Вот это аттракцион, блядь! Нас остановили!
There goes the local electricity. Like, there it goes again. So they're going to have to try and repair the thermal power plant for the 9th time in probably the 40th time, really, in recent months, to see that they can try and keep the power running in Belgorod for just a little bit longer. We've also heard good news out of France that they will be providing SAMP-T air defense systems to Ukraine. Here's one of them right here. This was at a French arms presentation, by the way. But the SAMP-T...
Is that a Renault?
It is a Renault. I think it is a Renault, or it's a man, like spelled M-A-N-N. But let me go and pull up the SAMP-T for all of y'all, because it's a really amazing air defense system. This is the French equivalent of the Patriot, and much like the French have to do on everything, which I have to say I respect them greatly for this, the French make everything in-house. They basically flat out refuse to get into a multinational arms effort with anyone else in Europe, or to buy weapons directly from another country like the United States. France demands, for national security purposes, that all of their weapon systems that they use in every category are actually developed and deployed entirely within France, meaning that the French make these systems from the ground up. This SAMP-T is actually incredibly comparable to the Patriot air defense systems, the MEM-104s, because SAMP-Ts have a range of about 150 kilometers at max. That's in the SAMP-T next generation, or NG variant of the system, which means that a SAMP-T actually has as much range as a PAC-2 Patriot air defense system, which is our longest range version of the system, which has a range of 110 miles. The French make these and sell them to a decent amount of people, from what I understand. And to show you all the list, here are the current operators of the SAMP-T. France Italy, which buys them from France, Singapore, which buys them from France. Ukraine already has 2 of them, and they've been using them to great effect. The Danish also are planning on buying some SAMPTs. Ukraine is planning on getting 8 more SAMPT batteries from France, and currently we're looking at Belgium, Luxembourg, and also a larger amount of countries throughout Europe trying to purchase the SAMPT systems from the French. So we understand that as of today, the French have announced that they're going to be throwing a whole new SAMPT battery at Ukraine absolutely free, which is a great thing to hear. And let me go see if I can show y'all what a SAMPT battery actually looks like, because it's not the singular launcher that they're giving, because that kind of sounds a little underwhelming. Each technical SAMPT, quote unquote, is actually an entire missile system. And here's an illustration kind of showing a little bit more of the system. Usually within a singular air defense battery, there are several TELs, which are the transport erector launchers that carry the missiles. And then there are a couple of other support vehicles. One of them is shown here. That is most likely the acquisition or targeting radar that we're seeing in this little illustration right here. You can also see it right here as well. And then there's usually a generator vehicle that travels around to give the other vehicles their electric power. And then there is also the command vehicle, which is just basically a giant cab on the back of the truck that the commanders of the battery hop in, and then they command the air defense battery from there, launching the missiles, operating the radars, and such things like that. So that is generally an entire SAMPT battery. Actually, as a matter of fact, this kind of shows off the entire thing, as a matter of fact. This is basically all the vehicles of the air defense battery, not showing all 6 of the TELs, and that's what the French are going to be giving Ukraine one of, is this entire air defense battery, not just the one launcher. And they're slated to get about 8 more of these as well in the future over the next few years. So the French are going all in, I mean legitimately all in, on providing the Ukrainians with as many SAMPTs as they can, and hopefully they'll be able to help the Ukrainians diversify, which usually isn't good logistically, their air defense chain, so that way if the US isn't providing Patriot missiles, the French are able to provide their SAMPT air defense missiles instead, in substitute. The Patriot systems, by the way, can't use SAMPT missiles. It's just that if Ukraine's Patriots run out of Patriot air missiles, that means luckily the SAMPTs will be able to pick up the slack with their own SAMPT missiles instead. But anyways, it's time for us now, folks, to move on out of this news and on into a second segment of the stream, because 1, we have absolutely slammed the fundraiser goal today. Oh! And 2, we have also been able to see that many people have been here with us through the entirety of our news segment, and I have to say that we are entirely honored and greatly appreciative to be able to run this news for all of y'all today. It is a very early stream, not really a breaking news stream. We just had to do this and get this out of the way, because to kind of let y'all know a little bit of detail. We have to get up at like 2 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, and if we try to run our normal nightly stream and then get up at 2 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, we actually don't get any sleep. So we had to change the schedule for a very rare occurrence this one time, to where we run our normal stream in the middle of the day instead of running it way later in the day, when that would make it impossible for us to get to the business that we have to tend to tomorrow. But before we get on into the questions, we actually have more breaking news coming out at this moment. And Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we do have some breaking news right now coming out of Tehran. This is becoming pretty much commonplace at this point. It's not anything too crazy, but we are seeing airstrikes taking place again on Tehran. We just got brand new footage here, so let's take a look and see what's happening.
Oh. Little air defense
Is that
fire.
gunfire? Yeah,
like,
that sounds like gunfire.
It's like a Shilka or a Gush gun or something.
Oh, they're conserving ammo too. Look at them firing a little burst.
Man, they said, firing little burst, Habibi. We're running low. It's like, that's not good for them, I suppose. But still, it's showing us a little bit of an ongoing strike going on right now in Tehran, and also the very small air defenses that Tehran now possesses, and generally the whole country possesses. So thank you, Matthew, for sharing that with us. And with that in mind, folks, it's now time for us to move on and into the second segment of the stream. But before we get to that, we have one last poll to cover, and it's actually on Taiwan. And Matthew, what are people thinking about the question that you asked them, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so Taiwan is still on the menu for China, by the way. We can't write that off. Taiwan is still an ongoing situation, and it's kind of like several other ongoing situations actually are still brewing up right now. It's really wild, the amount of brewing situations we have. We have, of course, the India-Pakistan thing, which is still simmering. It's also brewing as well. We have the Taiwan-China thing brewing. We have the Serbia-Kosovo thing brewing up as well, and also potentially a Cuba situation brewing up. So a lot of things in the queue, basically, as as the Brits would say. It's in the queue. They're queued up to basically tee it up. So Taiwan is saying that a large-scale Chinese military presence was recorded today near the island after a week-long absence of any type of Chinese military activity near Taiwan, which goes without saying that's very unusual. So what are your thoughts? 35% said China will invade within 6 months. 33% said China will invade in a year or two. 21% said China will not invade Taiwan. So I'm with the 36%. China will invade Taiwan probably within the next 6 months. That is my current guess right now, and I base that on this fact alone. We are seeing right now, for example, look at the logic coming out of Serbia. They're saying that right now, under the guise of the Middle East escalations and generally the world being generally in a pure state of chaos, that it could give them an opportunity to act and also act militarily against their enemies. That could give them a chance, and also it might give their enemies a chance to act as well from that as well. So I would say personally, I think China might try to capitalize on that as well. We have heard that Xi Jinping has been wanting to invade Taiwan, perhaps even last year actually, but he called it off for some unknown reason. So I think this might give them the opportunity that they're looking for. They're probably waiting to see how badly bogged down the West is going to get in the Middle East, and that will give them pretty much their green light. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say that I would generally be with the 33% or the 32%. China will probably invade in a year or two because while they are still conducting low-level coercion efforts, which is fairly common at this point in time, really over the past 10 years, they are clearly getting towards eventually attempting an actual war and invasion of Taiwan. And generally, with how foreign policy is being conducted at the moment, which is just, do shit and figure it out. Generally, this is giving them a prime time opportunity, at least within the next 3 years, to see that they might be able to jump on Taiwan, and then the U.S. might back off and not respond because we've ended up going a little bit too hard in the Middle East and possibly expended all of our air defense munitions or maybe other forms of conventional munitions, and for that reason, we really don't have an ability to be able to defend Taiwan, or more so willpower to help them out at that point. So I would say that the Chinese are eventually going to invade. It's just probably not going to be within 6 months. Right now, we know that places like the Dalian shipyard are currently working as hard as they can to pump out as many amphibious support vessels as possible and other specially constructed vessels like the Bailey Bridge ships to be able to try and make a amphibious invasion of Taiwan a reality. But we also understand there's got to be a lot of preparatory work that goes into invading Taiwan before a single Chinese soldier steps foot on a Taiwanese beach. They have to be able to deal with Taiwan's air defense systems and also their anti-ship missiles as much as they can. And that's going to pose a little bit of an issue because Taiwan, unlike other countries, has been getting very heavily and quietly into drone offensive and defensive measures, meaning that Taiwan could possibly conduct drone attacks onto the mainland of China with their one-way drones and could also try and conduct anti-drone defenses with drone-based defenses. We've even seen the Taiwanese providing drones in prior times to the state of Ukraine and helping them out with that significantly. So I'm sure many of y'all can get an idea. Taiwan, as far as drone warfare, is a lot more advanced than most other countries would be, most likely even including China, or at least par on par with China at this point right now. Given the fact that China would have to clear out their air defenses, that would pose a problem. And given the fact that they have to knock out the anti-ship missiles, that would also pose a problem. But once they get done and get rid of those, then they can finally try and land some forces on the Taiwan. But it'd have to be a large amount of forces and a huge supply capacity that they'll be able to keep up. Otherwise, their beachhead's going to get crushed. So they still have to build out some amphibious support capabilities for that purpose. Otherwise, this wouldn't really be able to be successful. And generally, China likes to try and hedge the bets within their favor as much as they can, to put it that way. And that means they'll probably wait a little bit longer than necessary before they kick something off because they don't want to jump into something early and then see it possibly turn into a failure. So I think that it's probably going to be still a year or two out. I'm saying that it's probably going to be 2027 or 2028 by the time the real threat of invasion in that window begins. So we're still kind of in a little bit of a safer period for now with China, but it's going to be getting into a more unstable situation in East Asia as the years pass by, at least in my opinion. But with that, I hope we've been able to address that poll well. And with that in mind, folks, it's time for us to get on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And considering that it was a Sunday fundraiser night, Sunday fundraiser day more so at this point in local time, we didn't really have a huge amount of super chats. Technically, super chats are not supposed to be thrown in. Like, YouTube made that a thing a while ago, and they can be thrown in now on Sundays. So we will address the few super chats that we have first, but then we're going to be trying to get into as many, and I truly mean as many live chats as we can, because fundraiser nights are nights where we have really no super chats basically, and we can hopefully get to a humongous amount of live chats so that way people aren't having to super chat to always have a question answered. This channel is not a pay to play channel. While we get a million super chats every night these days, and they take up pretty much the entire time of the question segment, we always want to make sure that we can get to people's questions without people having to pay a cent, because I wouldn't like the idea of people having to pay to get an answer. It's not like Resultar or something like that. We're just some dudes. So Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so first of all, though, we got to call off our top donors of the fundraiser. And tonight, we had a $1,000 donation from Traveling Tramp, who threw in the largest one by far of the night to Wounded Warriors Project. And a huge shout to you, Traveling Tramp, for that massive generosity. Truly, literally, I think that's like 1/3 almost of the total amount raised, which is incredible. We also had a 100 from Jackie Lou, as well as a 100 from Walter Philippet, as well as a 100 from Old Warrior Fella and B. Justin as well, along with ARP Bob. And then we had a 50 from Yanara Sorgofor, as well as Ella MC Wills Nafo, World Funding, as well as Dema Noack, Evanescent Wave, Snow White Sigant, as well as a 50 from Fred Zerzal, Gunfox 61, and Nana of 3. And thank you all very much, even if we were not able to call your name out, because there were a lot more donors than that tonight. But we appreciate everybody for helping us to raise over $3,200 once again for Wounded Warriors Project, once again tonight. And I don't know exactly what the total is right off the top of my head, but we are probably well over $1.6 million total raised for the channel. It's probably over 1.7 at this point, if we did the calculations. But a hell of a lot of charity on the channel. We appreciate that for the LSA making that possible. But Enforcer, what say you?
An absolutely crazy thing to see. I got to say a huge shout out to everyone, including Traveling Tramp, for the unbelievable support that we've seen to the fundraiser in the middle of the day, mind you. A lot of people were either expecting a middle of the day fundraiser or they weren't, and I still have to say that that's amazing that we were able to mobilize the Lee Spring Army and see that the fundraiser goal was smashed in a wildly short amount of time and well beyond expectations. So a humongous thanks to everyone once again for their incredible support, because y'all are helping out folks through the Wounded Warriors Project. So big thanks to y'all all so much once again. And with that, it's time for us to get on into some questions. Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first Super Chat question, we have 3 of them to get, by the way, and then we'll get to our live chats. This one goes to ARP Bob. $9 support. He did not leave a comment, but thank you very much, ARP Bob, for the largest super chat of the day, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
Hey, and a humongous shout out to ARP Bob. You didn't throw in a comment, but we were massively appreciative of the support, and we never expect to be getting fun, like super chat support on Sundays, but we thank you massively, because your support does help us to keep this channel running and keep the news rolling day in and day out. So tremendous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a super chat from Con45 who put in 20, and thank you very much, Con, as well, for that $20 support. He said, guys, I just read breaking news that the new Ayatollah and all the new top clerics and officials of Iran have been transported to Moscow to command all Iranian war operations from the Kremlin. And have you seen that announcement?
I haven't seen that. I've heard that he's been wounded and generally in a coma since the 28th of February, and they transported him on a special flight to Moscow to receive medical treatment that's a little bit higher end than what they might have in Iran. But I haven't heard of the entirety of the Council of Experts, because they all basically died in coma a week and a half ago. I haven't heard of them being transported to Moscow. I've only heard about him. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $2 support from Mr. Red, who put in that 2 and said LSA.
And LSA, and a humongous thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to say, long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never truly die. And with that, we're on the next one.
And, folks, it is now time to jump into our Morse code decoders and live chat questions. And starting off with our full roster of Morse code decoders, we had Paul, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, Heroia Fluffiness, Kush, Kuberteric, Sire, and Brian. They said the Morse code says, the strikes are so heavy down the Middle East, I think we'll need a forklift, and LT, LSA.
And I got to thank you so much for, well, actually, ding, and that's the sound of money. And y'all get that dead on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all greatly for getting that correct time and time again. Truly an amazing and incredible thing to see that so many people have been able to get that Morse code message correct, even in the middle of the day. I don't know why it's so amazing for things to happen in the middle of the day. I guess we're just so used to running things at night that the middle of the day stuff feels special. But a humongous congrats to y'all once again. And also, sorry folks, I was distracted there because I saw a bot and I was trying to get a bot in the middle of Matthew reading off the Morse code. But with that, it is time for us to finally get on into them live chats. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So our first live chat question here goes to 2 Days Gone, who said, "Where's the uranium? Where's the HEU, that highly enriched uranium?" And we don't really know where it's at. The last report was that the Iranians are holding it at Isfahan. That's where we had last heard they were holding it. I think the Iranians claim they have about 500 kilograms or so. The Russians seem to corroborate that, but we've also heard reports that's up to 800 kilograms. Whatever it is, it's enough for multiple nuclear warheads. That's the problem. So it has to be retrieved, or otherwise, largely, the biggest objective of this war will not be achieved. So that's where we think it's at. We think it's at Isfahan, but only the U.S. truly knows where it's at. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that generally we believe that it might be in an underground facility in Isfahan, but that's a very, very strong, strong if. Like, we don't really know if it is in Isfahan, but it's somewhere within one of the facilities that's largely been buried at this point. That's what we're thinking. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have one here from Michelle, who said, "It's my understanding that less than 3,000 feet of operable runway is left on Karg Island, and what U.S. craft can even land there?"
Well, that's a great question. That we have these crazy things called tilt rotors. They tilt the rotors, and they're called MV-22 Ospreys. Let me show it to you. Here's a little fella. These things can land on 0 feet of runway for the larger part. They can vertically take off and land. Generally, we wouldn't land aircraft on Karg Island. If anything, it would most likely be an amphibious assault supported by helicopters with air assault troops dropped off. So I'm not being sarcastic answering your question, by the way. It's just that we don't actually have to land a fixed-winged aircraft on the Karg to try and take it. We can just drop off guys on Sea Stallions, Chinooks, if those are present, highly likely that they're not, Ospreys, and other sorts of helicopters or tilt rotor aircraft that have helicopter-like qualities that would be able to land basically on a non-existent runway. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And also saw someone say Chinooks. I don't really think the USS Tripoli has any. Let me go check that though, because I'd like to know myself. Generally, I would believe that they probably are using Sea Stallions and such things like that. And let's see what they have. So they have Nighthawks, which are the Navy's version of the Black Hawk. They have Vipers for combat air support. They also have the Venoms, which are basically these super souped up Hueys that the Marine Corps uses. They also have the King Stallion, which these things are tremendous. I mean, like, it's if y'all have ever seen let me see if I can show y'all a Sea Stallion versus a Chinook. Sea Stallion versus Chinook size. Let me see if I can show this to y'all, because this is mind-blowing. Oh, here you go. Here's a good idea to give y'all a little bit of a picture of how big one of these Sea Stallions are. This is one getting refueled behind a Hercules. The fuselage of a Sea Stallion is almost the size of the fuselage of a Hercules. Like, these things are absolutely insane, like, in size. It's unbelievable, the scale of them. Like, hell, even at this point, I think this thing almost gives, like, the Mi-26 a run for its money in size. The thing's tremendously sized. But that would generally be, like, the Marine Corps or the Navy's equivalent of a Chinook. And these things are wildly powerful. I mean, crazy powerful in terms of thrust. Then they also have F-35B Lightnings on the Tripoli. These would be their air support in a larger sense. And they also have the Ospreys that we were speaking of. They apparently do have Harriers, like the AV-8B Harrier 2s, still on board. But I generally know that the Marine Corps has been trying heavily to retire these and replace them all with the F-35. So I don't know if that's accurate information at the moment right now. Maybe. I'd have to look into the flight squads and such on board the Tripoli, but generally that's the kind of air power that would be available from an amphibious ready group at the best. So not really any Chinooks. I was generally correct on that. The Chinooks are more of a Army thing and maybe an Air Force thing for groups like MARSOC, but that's fairly rare. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Tank Gunner, who said, "What are y'all's favorite helicopters?" And honestly, I would say, like, it fluctuates from time to time. Like, I like the normal Chinook, especially the ones that the Night Stalkers use. Those Chinooks are pretty cool. Like, they're all blacked out. Like, they're pretty cool looking. They use those down in Venezuela to get Maduro. That was part of it. But I will say my most recent favorite helicopter is probably just the Apache, because those actually fly all over Salt Lake City. There's a National Guard station around here. Also, they're based at a local airport, and they fly around all the time. So I get to see those things literally every single single day the Apaches are flying over my head. So I actually, when I was out the other day, I saw one flying over. It was like two of them, and I looked up and I waved. I was like, oh look, I'll wave. It's pretty low and stuff like that. So I waved, and then the machine gun turned my direction. And I was like, oh. I was like, well, it's like, because it turns out the pilot of the Apache wears a helmet. It's highly advanced, and it allows them to target the machine gun using the direction their head is turning. So if they turn and look at something, the gun's also looking at that same thing as well. But also, by the way, I'm joking, by the way. The gun did not turn, by the way. I think they disable that when they're over like populated areas. So it didn't turn. I'm joking, by the way. But that's actually how it works when they have it turned on. So it's pretty cool. Those things are impressive and menacing as hell when they're over your head.
Also, by the way, folks, what Matthew's talking about, this is actually the way that a chain gun is stowed. When it's in the stowed configuration, it's where it looks directly front of the nose cone, and then the gun cants upwards, basically looking at the sensory equipment at the front of the Apache. A lot of people get a laugh out of that one, by the way. I would have to say that, in my honest opinion, my favorite helicopter probably... It really depends on what type, like what kind of job, like is it a utility helicopter, an attack helicopter? Because there's so many different varieties, and I kind of have like my favorite in each. But I would be entirely frank. If you're just talking about any helicopter, I would also have to be with Enforcer Matt. It's the AH-64E, the AH-64E Guardian specifically, because I think it's probably the coolest version of the Apache that they've come out with the over the tree line air-to-ground radar above the rotor assembly, the amazing optronic systems or optic systems and such. I mean, it really is an incredible sort of a helicopter, really something cool. And you know, speaking about that little helmet system, and Matthew's talking about, it's even more impressive when you talk about the finer details of the system, because the helicopter pilot doesn't actually have that. It's actually the weapons operator on board the Apache that has that specific helmet. And when he looks around, the helmet actually allows him to see through the helicopter to what's below him, because it uses some of the optical systems on board the helicopter to basically give him a look straight through the floorboards at whatever he's directly looking at. And the gun will also rotate and pivot to look down at whatever he's looking at. But what's even crazier about that, folks, is that system not only allows the gun to track exactly where the gunner is looking, but it allows for the computers inside the helicopter to figure out what speed at which the helicopter is moving, the exact distance of the target he's looking at, and to also have the gun correct itself to lead the target to make sure that the rounds can actually land on that pinpoint target even while the helicopter is moving, with the gunner looking through basically the floorboards of the helicopter. It's a wildly incredible and advanced sort of a system. Really one that's crazy to see. Generally, I haven't heard of it being used a lot, because usually in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, if an Apache was ever used, they were usually several miles away and usually stationary because there's no sort of an aerial threat. But in reality, I mean, they could do run and gun attacks like we saw in Caracas in Venezuela with the AH-1Z Vipers and the Apaches that were used there as a part of the 160th SOAR, and I believe the Iwo Jima ARG. They can actually do that quite commonly because they have the easy capability to do that, unlike other older helicopters like those used in former Soviet countries like the Mi-24, the Mi-35, and other more modern helicopters like the Ka-52 and the Mi-28. But I would have to say, without a doubt, it's probably the Apache for me as well. But I hope that does address your question well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question here from A-Team, who said, will the U.S. start hitting Iran oil infrastructure? And I don't think the U.S. will. I think the U.S. has some type of idea that's sort of floating around in the back of their heads. They're thinking that they should leave the Iranian oil infrastructure intact because they're going to try to pull a Venezuela after this war is over. They're going to hope that they get basically a Delcy Rodriguez that's put in charge of Iran, which, plot twist, isn't going to happen. Iran is not Venezuela. But that's what they're thinking. They're hoping to probably extract some oil out of the Iranian economy, or at least control it and try to use it as leverage to some degree or another. So I highly doubt the U.S. will hit Iran's oil. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I highly doubt that we're going to hit the oil, because, well, like Matthew's saying, we're kind of just hoping to get a good mullah. Look at you, what a good mullah. That's literally what we're looking for, which is ridiculous. As far as the foreign policy approach, it won't turn out well with Venezuela. Promise you that one. It's not going to turn out well with Iran. I can promise you that one as well. I don't really know what the hell the plan is as far as what we're going to do with the government. But outside of that, though, what I would say is that generally we're not going to be hitting oil infrastructure a whole lot. I think that's also why we're really unhappy with the Israelis, because the Israelis just love to see total destruction as far as their government is concerned, and just to kind of be honest, suffering generally, like, just to be frank. And then the U.S. is like, no, the oil. Like, right now, Dick Cheney is spinning in his grave right now at a fast enough rotation. He could replace the oil consumption needs of the United States if we switched over to electric only. So, with that in mind, they have to limit the strikes on oil infrastructure so that way it doesn't end up getting damaged and profit can immediately resume once the conflict ends. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from Santa Fe Railroad. He said, do you think that the U.S. has allies in Europe? Oh, yeah, we still have allies in Europe, by the way. Like, the tensions between the U.S. and NATO is very, very high. It's probably the worst it's been probably in the history of the NATO alliance itself. But it's kind of like this relationship. If you work somewhere, you work for an employer, you naturally have coworkers, most likely. And if you still go to an office, which some people still do, there's always occasionally a coworker that's like a clown or somebody who's just a jackass, basically. And everybody knows, okay, that's so-and-so over there. They're a jackass and they're a terrible bastard to deal with, but you have to deal with them because it's in the interest of the company and you work there. So it's basically they're forced to work with the U.S. still, because obviously there's a massive intelligence sharing initiative between the NATO countries, the Five Eyes, etc. You still gotta work with each other. So Europe's probably just biding their time, basically, because obviously every 4 years is a presidential election, and they're probably just thinking it's a temporary thing. Right now, they're obviously not happy with the United States, but they're not going to do anything to necessarily destroy the alliance. But it's definitely strained tensions for sure. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that the tensions are certainly strained, but generally, if push came to shove, we would probably still see a lot of allies in Europe are still present. It's just that depending on how they're treated after that crisis subsides, we might then see the final split. Because right now it's a fairly unstable sort of a time to, lay it out to y'all. In the last administration, the U.S. was basically non-existent, and now currently the U.S. is existent, but openly unfriendly to basically all European countries and really everyone who's an ally of the United States. So a lot of countries are starting to realize, well, if U.S. administration and foreign policy keeps going this way to where they're either non-existent in foreign policy and they're not side by side with us, or they're actively unfriendly and kind of working against us to some extent, then we're kind of better off picking some other group to be allies with, or we're better off on our own. And so that's generally where they're kind of at right now and what they're all sort of figuring out. But the thing is, though, is that if a war starts with Russia, it's highly likely that everybody would come together for that last bravura of going to war with Russia and hopefully seeing that that doesn't become a complete nuclear exchange. And then once that ends, depending on how the foreign policy works from there, like, for example, if everybody basically has a reconciling and goes, you know what, we're all great friends, we're amazing folks, and it'd be good to stay friends forever, then we probably see that things would end up fine and everyone would look at that as the uniting moment once again. But if the U.S. started to treat Europe poorly again, Europe would go, you know what, we just went through a war, fairly destructive on our lands. Not really the greatest idea to keep remaining friends with a country that clearly is going to be unfriendly to us. We'll just go and create our own sphere of influence. And then that could happen as well.
Yeah, and they largely are to a large extent. Like, for example, France and all these other countries, they're beefing up their domestic security, partially because they see the Russia threat, and also partially because they detect that there's very high tensions between the United States and NATO, with the U.S. being the biggest NATO ally in the alliance. That's obviously concerning for countries like France. So the further they make contingency plans that the U.S. might abandon NATO or somehow back off of it, the further they make basically entrenchments of their national security inside of Europe, the easier it is for Europe to say, okay, piss off, United States, you can go your direction, we're going our direction, because they're building their own infrastructure to be independent of the United States. So over time, like the Enforcer was also mentioning, over time it might become easier for Europe to detach from the United States, but for right now, they probably can't.
Yeah, they probably can easily. I mean, there's a lot of countries in Europe that kind of rely on U.S. arms to be able to function. It's actually not as many as you would think, like, to be entirely honest with y'all. I mean, really, to be frank, coming to think about it, a lot of them really don't rely on a lot on U.S. weaponry, now that I'm thinking about it. The Italians don't use American tanks. The British don't either. The French don't. The Germans don't. The Polish do, but all of their tanks aren't American made. A lot of them are actually made either in Germany or inside of Poland via South Korean licensing arrangements to build the K2s inside of Poland. Sweden sells a lot of tanks and APCs to surrounding countries. Basically, every country in the Baltics is using some form of Swedish purchased equipment. Really, the only thing that I can say that some countries kind of fall behind on is air defense. A lot of countries, usually like Britain, have bought historically American air defenses in the past, but even nowadays, Britain's kind of distancing themselves from that with the Sky Saber, which is basically their equivalent of a Patriot or a THAAD, and they're going to be building those entirely within Britain and also fielding them with British-made ammunition. So, generally, I mean, Europe isn't that reliant on the United States militarily, but economically, we have, like, Europe and the United States have such heavy economic relations, it would be absolutely it would kill one or the other. It would kill both of us, actually, as far as the United States and Europe is concerned, for us to completely split, because a lot of the trade relations would start to disappear with that as well, and a lot of the financial flow that keeps everyone employed in Europe and the United States would disappear in some areas, and there would almost be complete industrial collapses in some sectors because of that, which could then ripple across the whole economy. So, generally, they're not going to be leaving anytime soon, but at the same time, they're not like woefully reliant to the point that they're basically handicapped by the relationship with the United States. But I'd also have to say, like, some people I think are absolutely ridiculous with this. I've been seeing this in the chat. Some people are like, Europe sucks. Europe sucks. It's like, who else is better? Who else are we going to be friends with? You know, a country can't go it on their own out there in the world. You have to have a sphere of influence and allies to work with as well. So who in the world replaces Europe? I'll wait to get an answer on that one. I have a feeling I'm going to be waiting until I die, because there's literally nobody out there except for our East Asian allies that are at all comparable to what Europe gives us, being friends with them. And I mean, hell, we're already friends with East Asia, so it's not like we have to sacrifice the Europeans to go become friends with the East Asians. We're already friends with the East Asians. So I don't really get the point of always going, Europe sucks, Europe sucks. Because it's like, what's the alternative? It's like, and on top of that, Europe's great. I mean, like, they've got really decent economies. They make amazing consumer goods. I mean, people in America purchase them out the wazoo. I mean, there's more European cars on the road in America now than there are American-made cars at this point, from what I can tell. I mean, hell, you see Mercedes, Audis, and everything else everywhere in America. You don't see a lot of American brands anymore. I mean, Europe has a lot to offer. And not only that, they're the largest military power on the planet, combined outside the United States. And before anyone goes, well, that's the whole of them, how about country to country? Well, if we want to be fair, we could compare the National Guard of Alabama versus the Army of the Czech Republic. But I think everyone would start to say that's fairly stupid at that point, because it is. So if you're looking at it bulk for bulk, the U.S. is a bulk versus, along with Europe as a bulk. That's the two largest military and economic powers in the world allied together. Why in the world would we ever want to disrupt a relationship like that? It's very beneficial to everyone. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $20 super chat from Arar983, and thank you very much, Arar, for that $20 super chat, and we do appreciate that very, very much. He said, Enforcers Dacia / Super XL Lemon Pepper Costco Chicken Fund.
Yay! And thank you so much for the Costco Chicken Fund. We greatly appreciate it, and I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say, it's amazing and a wonderful thing that folks like you help us to be able to eat those delicious Costco chickens. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from Fayuma, who said, any plans to de-escalate tensions in Hormuz, protect shipping, and prevent global economic problems? So we just got actually a piece of news a second ago that's generally stating this. The report says that the current U.S. administration, as soon as this week, plans to announce that multiple countries have agreed to form a coalition that will escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz, which runs along the Iranian coast. They said they're still discussing it, but they're saying that whether or not these operations would begin before or after hostilities end is still up for debate. So if it's after it ends, it's pointless. If it's during the hostilities, it might be something of note. But once again, we discussed this the other night. This whole coalition of global countries coming to the Strait of Hormuz and trying to escort commercial shipping vessels and oil tankers. It's like, you know, who's going to go first? It's like, who's going to be the one to be the sacrificial lamb, essentially, to go into the strait and probably take a missile from the Iranian launchers. That's probably what's going to happen. So I'm not entirely sure if that's actually going to work. And of course, it's still in the discussion phase for the most part. So it may not even happen. That's the report, but I doubt it's even going to happen. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that a multinational coalition is kind of a little like lightly possible, but it might not be big. It might just be like France and South Korea that joins us. We're hearing that apparently South Korea is giving some serious consideration to possibly joining this attempt to clear out the Strait of Hormuz. But I mean, the reality is, folks, is that they can kind of all sit back and do nothing, really. I mean, because the thing is that, yes, the rising oil prices will hurt them, but it's also going to hurt us. So, I mean, just under the premise of it's hurting us, we kind of have to clear it out whether anyone joins us or not. And then they all kind of get to reap the benefits even if they've done nothing. So, a lot of countries might make the decision, well, the U.S. is going to have to clear it out anyways, so we might as well just not join in and let them do it, because it's not even our problem. We didn't even start the war. And also, I mean, to be entirely honest, it is kind of fair. Like, I think that's absolutely stupid, folks. Some people are like, well, clearly America made this F up, so now it's everyone else's in the world's problem to fix this F up. It's like, not really. When you start a war and you're fighting it, you have to be the one to fix the F ups. Like in the U.S. Civil War, you didn't see Abraham Lincoln go, damn, General Burnside's just lost the battle. Well, time to call up the British. I'm sure they can fix up the Confederacy. Like, you never saw that. I mean, that would be stupid. Like, that's a really, like, goofy sort of a foreign policy premise is, oh, damn, we've effed it up. All right, let's get everyone else in the world to go fix it. It's like, what are they, our henchmen? It's like, this is our war, really. It's like, if we screwed something up and it doesn't look good for us or the world, at that point, it's really more so our priority to fix it, more so than anyone else's. I mean, even if nobody joins in, it's not like, oh, look at them sitting back and reaping the benefits of our hard labor. It's just like, well, we should have had a war plan that dealt with the Strait of Hormuz on day one, and then we wouldn't be having to ask everyone to come join in, truth be told. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from Flan-tastic, who said, if the Kremlin was destroyed, would the mutually assured destruction doctrine auto-launch if it didn't detect communication anymore?
No, because it's not attached to a building; it's attached to a person, which would be Putin. So nothing would really happen if the Kremlin got hit. It would open up Ukraine's central governmental buildings to attacks, which they definitely would probably get attacked within the next few days after that. But outside of that, you wouldn't really see anything like massive nuclear reaction over something like that. But I hope that does address it.
I don't think there's any such thing as any type of automatic nuclear launch system. Like, even I think pretty much for every country out there that fields nuclear weapons of an intercontinental variety, I think they all have a manual launch system. Like, there has to be a verification of launch codes. There has to be the command actually issued to the local station commander where the nukes are actually stationed at. It's nothing's like automatic. Like, I don't think there's any dead man's hand or something like that when it comes to that system. That's why we have the E-6B doomsday planes, because if there is ground destruction inside the United States and there is a doomsday scenario, then the command is manually given from the plane in that case. So there's always a person involved with it. It's not automatic.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I don't think there is such an automatic response. I think that would generally not happen. Also, I saw some people saying, well, America has soft power. Yeah, but the thing is that if you want to be the global police and you want to be the global superpower, sometimes you just have to do things on your own. Like, sometimes you just have to be that guy. Like, you don't see the police being like, I'm the defender of the community. That's why I call on you, random citizen, to pick up a gun and join my posse to go and arrest this guy at his house. Like, you're not going to see that happen, because if you take up that sort of a role in that position, sometimes you just have to assume everything's going to fall on you. And especially when you start a war, everything as a result of that is going to fall on you. And if none of these people were original joining members of the conflict, that means it still falls on us completely. There's really no way to make that everyone else's problem. Like, for example, if you go and get in your car and you go crash it, it's not the city's responsibility to get every citizen in the city to give you like 10 or $100 each so that you can go and buy a new car. That's entirely on you. You wrecked the car, that's your problem.
Unless the city did not properly maintain their roadways and you hit a pothole, which caused you to crash and total your car, then you might get a payout from the taxpayer funds of the city because it might have been their responsibility.
maybe in that case, but outside of that scenario, like we're just talking about like a normal day to where you said, I'm going to hot rod my car, and you just slammed on the gas, and like a normal Mustang driver, you slammed the thing into a telephone pole or, a crowd of people or something, and you total your car and maybe take out a couple of folks. That's going to be on you to fix the car. Hell, insurance might not even cover that at that point. So you're going to have to figure out how to either fix the thing or get a new one. Like that's how it works in the war. Like, for example, here's another one. When the Germans were losing World War II, you didn't see them go, damn, these Soviets, Americans, and British are proving more troublesome than ever. All right, we're going to get Mussolini to deal with that one. It's like, it's like, no, I mean, like, at that point, you're in the war. You started the war, and if it's going bad or good, it's all your responsibility. You've got to carry the thing to its finish. So in this case, I don't really think anyone's obligated to come and clear the strait. If they joined us, I think that's great, and I think that the United States would have to make it clear if they join us, we're clearly going to owe them something. Otherwise, why would they join? But outside of that, nobody has to join us. They're not obligated to do that. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
Our next super chat goes to Craig Humphreys, and thank you, Craig, for that $10 support. He said, I just listened from the start. Is it possible that the USA didn't bomb the oil on the Iranian islands so they can say, open the shipping lanes or we'll wipe out your source of income?
Could be. They could be a leverage attempt. Like, look how easily we bombed your forces on the island. We can bomb the oil that easily, too. Now it's your choice. We could be doing that, or we could just be trying to ensure that it remains intact so that way when we get the government we want in Iran, whoever that is and however that turns out, we can start to see the flow of oil return immediately out of Iran, basically like nothing happened. Because I have a feeling, folks, here's what's going to happen. A lot like Venezuela, we're going to do this with Iran. 50 years ago, when the Khomeini overthrew the Shah of Persia, great guy, by the way, but we're not letting him lead the country. His son's not leading. But beyond that, though, when they stole out the oil, they threw out the American oil companies, and they're coming back bigger and better than ever. They're going to be getting all of the oil, all of this great, delicious oil, because we're owed it for 50 years in back pay. And that's what we're going to do, probably. So that's probably why we didn't bomb the oil facilities on Karg Island. But with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a super chat from Turgeton, who put in a 5, and thank you for that support. They said, great channel to follow.
And thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a live chat question from NPro, who said, because of the one China policy, I assume not much condemnation will come to China after invasion. And can China propose to Europe to give up Russian support for Taiwan invasion?
Ooh. That's actually a good point, because that's actually a part of China's larger foreign policy strategy. Is this kind of united front deal, where everybody basically doesn't recognize Taiwan as a country. And what's interesting is that we don't recognize them as a country officially. But what the United States did as a loophole is that we said we don't recognize Taiwan as an independent nation, but we do respect the sovereignty of the Republic of China's government on the island of Taiwan. Which is basically saying we don't officially admit that they exist, but they do exist and they have a right to exist. That's basically what we're saying. So some other countries do fall within that parameter as well. I'm not sure the entire list, but as far as we are concerned in the United States, we consider the government of the Republic of China to be sovereign on the island of Taiwan, which would be our casus belli for joining the conflict as an active belligerent in the defense of the ROC's government on the island. So, generally, I wouldn't know about other countries. Generally, Europe would probably consider it a non-issue. I think most European countries actually consider the Republic of China or Taiwan to not be a sovereign nation, and they also don't respect the sovereignty of the ROC's government on the island of Taiwan like we do. So most of them would probably not even really care all too much, at least for the foreign policy outlook, because that's their official stance. But we would, and really that's all that matters, because East Asia isn't Europe's issue. That's literally ours. Like, East Asia is basically our alliance, not Europe's. So it really only matters that we would be present and available for the fighting in that instance. And also, a lot of other European countries don't really have any power projection capabilities into East Asia either. So they'd basically be effectively useless if that war started. Not a lot of them could even get there. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Cole's Dead, who said, what have they not hit? Or I think I'm going to say, why have they not hit and sealed the salt mines? They are huge caverns that weapons could be stored in.
We have not hit the salt mines because we have to let the Iranians find somewhere to extract the salt from. They're very salty in the government, so we have to let them have that. Otherwise, that could start causing even worse escalations if they don't have a place to at least extract the salt from and take it somewhere else so that way it doesn't overflow. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a question here from two Vikings who said, what do you guys think about the crazy specs on the F-47? And is it going to be a game changer in the air warfare space, in your opinion?
The F-40 has new pictures come out of the F-47?
I'm not really sure. I've seen the B-21 Raider new pictures, and we saw that in flight the other day, but I'm not sure about the F-47.
Yeah, I haven't heard or seen anything on the the F-47. I did see the B-21 though, and I think you're talking about those little dots. Let me see if I can find them here really quickly. Shoot. I don't think we'll be able to find this quickly, at least on a Google search. I know the picture. Oh, wait a minute. Here we are. Here's the picture. You're talking about these little vents right here, or these little black dots.
Oh! Is that a B-21?
Yes, this is the Raider.
Oh,
Look how
nice
beautiful
right
it is.
I like that. Look at that thing. That's a crazy thing right there.
Look at my boy. But beyond that, I don't know what those are for, actually. That would be beyond my knowledge. Really interesting to see them, because this is the first picture we've ever seen these things in. I'm thinking that they might be some sort of an air intake. Probably not. Now that I'm thinking about that, that really wouldn't make a lot of sense. I don't know what they are. I can't even really take a good guess at that. So I'd have to declare ignorance on that. Say I think that's beyond my technological expertise, because I'm not really a technician for one of these things, Sally. So it's beyond my knowing. But they are interesting, though, and they did show up in pictures for the first time ever just yesterday, and everyone was like, what the hell are those? And I don't really know either. Here's another picture of it, where you can see them right here as well. It might be something for testing purposes only. They might have put those onto the airframe so that way they can try and gather some sort of data, because we never saw them in the original pictures. Let me see if I can show those to y'all. Here it is. Well, actually, they're here. They're not in this one. And
this thing's looking fine. I'll tell you what. Look at this thing. I feel like it would be an honor. Like, the enemy should be honored if this thing flies over and hits your place. Like, they should be honored by the fact that such a marvel of engineering. I mean, you have to admit, like, if there's gonna be, like, for example, some destruction happening in an enemy country, like, I think the best case scenario is the B-21.
Honestly, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right, Matthew. This thing is really cool. Also, here's the size comparison between the B-21 and the B-2. The B-2 is a little fella. The B-21 is a little fella, and the B-2 is a big boy. But they started to shift over. Here's why it's a little bit smaller. They started to shift over in the concept in the Air Force that instead of having massive strategic bombers, it's better to have a whole bunch of smaller tactical bombers. So the tempo and pace of air operations can remain incredibly high instead of having a whole bunch of large bombers that can conduct air operations at a slower pace. So that's why they're moving over to smaller bombers and larger numbers like the B-21. But I will have to say that the B-21 did what the B-2 did, but better. I mean, I got to say, this thing is slamming the B-2 out of the park.
But what about the capacity to hold, like, the larger munitions? Because as we know, the B-2 bomber is currently the only operational aircraft that we have that can carry the GBU-57 MOP. So can the B-21 carry that, or is that going to be a limitation?
I don't think the B-21 can carry as many MOPs. I think it might be able to carry, like, I haven't even heard that it's rated for that. In reality, it might be rated for it eventually, but I think it's only like 1 because it can only carry half the payload. But also, just to deal with that, like, they've already beat you to the punch on that one, Matthew. They've actually placed an order, I think, for another 20 B-2 bombers, which will increase the size of the B-2 bomber fleet by 100% or so. So that means that we'll still have the ability to use bombs like MOPs and such, but it won't be to the kind of degree. Well, it actually will be to the same degree we have that ability now. It's just that the B-21s will be able to conduct more bombing operations in a higher frequency and generally drop more ordnance over a shorter period of time.
Yeah, I would say so. I feel like going from the B-2 to the B-21 is kind of like going from, like, the MacBooks, like when they had, like, the Intel chips in them, to, like, the MacBooks with, like, the M1 chips in them. Like, you know that, like, the M series.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you know the reference right there, because you're not an Apple person
Yeah, no,
yourself.
I
You're more of a
don't.
Windows person. But somebody out there will get the reference. It's a pretty big leap between the two. Same general shape and design, but the underneath, though, and also the general capabilities are vastly improved.
You know, I find it funny though because a lot of people are like, "Man, it must be so cool to fly one of these." Honestly, to be honest, it's probably about the same as flying a commercial airliner because these things aren't like highly maneuverable or anything. You know, they're basically straight line flyers like a commercial airliner. So when they get over Iran, they go boom, boom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. He's just talking into the bomb bay to the bombs. You're about to be departing over Tehran. We hope that you have an enjoyable stay for your short time that you'll be around. They start dropping the JDAMs onto the targets. But also, by the way, I have to let y'all know, the B-21 is not in combat operation yet. We're still doing prototype testing on it for now with the prototypes that we have. And doing flight tests and such, but it hasn't entered mass production yet, and it also hasn't entered actual service yet, so it's not being used on Iran. But
have you seen that new triangular aircraft that they're coming out with?
Which one?
The I think they're calling. I can't remember the code name right off the bat. I can't remember. I think it's called the TR3B1 Orb.
This one?
Oh yeah, that's it right there. I remember this one. The
Oh
subject
yeah,
of many AI videos.
the petrodollar plane. Yeah, like
The Black
like
Manta.
the
The Manta Ray.
the esoteric craft. Ah, yes. I see you know
Yes,
your UFOs
because
well.
because you know when you build a triangular, allegedly stealth aircraft, of course you add 3 1 million lumen spotlights to the bottom of it, so that way everybody can see it very clearly.
Yeah, because clearly nothing says stealth like, I don't want you to see this, but I'm also going to put 3 suns on the bottom of this thing so that way you definitely see it. Like, very sensible approach.
Indeed, I must say there's a video that somebody put out of allegedly a spotting or a sighting of an aircraft that resembles this one right here in this mock-up. I think there's a real patent out there for that design, by the way. But just because there's a patent out there doesn't mean it was actually produced. That's a misnomer that people have quite a bit. But someone had a video claiming to have spotted this thing over Venezuela, and to me, the video looked like AI. Like to me, like it looked clearly like it wasn't real. But some people ran with it, kind of like they're running with the idea that Netanyahu is dead, which he's clearly alive. He just came out today in the coffee shop and got some coffee. So, it's just, the conspiracy theories. You got to love it.
You gotta love it. I love how people are like, Netanyahu is dead. And he's like, no, he's not. His brother's dead, though, but he's not. So, a little bit of a difference there. I gotta tell y'all, folks, the Iranian bots have been coping hard. Like, I've seen some of them even saying the president's dead. It's like, damn, they are really coping hard. I mean, if like the president doesn't shut up for like 5 minutes, we know he's not dead because he's still posting shit on Truth Social every 5 minutes. So it's like, that one doesn't even work. I mean, you can literally go over and see the active accounts. It's like, that's just full of crap. Like, and then they do that with everything now. They're like, oh, Europe is crushed. It's like, where? It's like, when? It's like, when did that happen? Like, I've been seeing the Iranian cope bots going so hard on just lying about everything. I mean, like, the war is going really badly for them, and I get that they got to do their little propagandizing, but they take it to the extreme. It's almost like watching the Indian bots at work, where they're like, we have destroyed Pakistan, and Shabazz is in prison. It's like, no, he's not. It's like, what are y'all talking about? But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on and into the next one.
All right, so up next, a big shout out to Dax Salmon, who put in a $100 to support to the fundraiser and brought us up to 3,500 raised, by the way. And a huge shout out to you, Dax Salmon, for throwing in that generous support to the fundraiser. And we also have another super chat here from Decepticon, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much. They said, hello again. And is China supporting Russia so they can gain more influence? And also, what is the possibility that China could turn on Russia either instead of or after a potential invasion of Taiwan? And LLT, LSA.
I have a feeling that the relationship between Russia and China is only going to go as far as they can throw it. It's a very temporary one. Russia doesn't like China. China doesn't like Russia. And while Russia is incredibly weak, they still have like the big dog idea in their head, top G, and they don't realize that they're bottom G. You know what I mean? Like base pill. But beyond that, though, I'd say that their relationship isn't going to be lasting all too much longer after the end of the war in Ukraine, really, because the Russians are going to dip once the Chinese try and invade Taiwan. They're going to go, wow, that's crazy. Anyways, good luck, and then they're going to leave the whole thing. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from Yenya Tolls, who said, does Taiwan have any offensive measures for China at all?
Can you reread that one?
Does Taiwan have any offensive measures for China at all? And so, since you're thinking about that one right there, I'll answer a little bit. Taiwan has natural defenses. Their geography is a defense in itself. It's sort of hard to make landings on Taiwan to a certain degree. So that's why China's been investing heavily and try to build specialized custom landing craft, so that way they can try to overcome the natural barriers. That's one part of it, but that's not really a manufactured capability. That's just natural that the island has on it. So that's one part of it. Also, they have quite a lot of Western-made air defense, to my knowledge. I'm not sure of the exact systems and quantities that they have, but they have some Western-made air defense as well. So, and also the U.S. has armed the hell out of them. Like they have, I think, all the modern weapons possible and things like that. They have all that stuff too. But Enforcer, what else do they got?
So Taiwan has this crazy offensive weapon. It's called the Three Gorges Dam. Like, I'm just kidding. By the way, a lot of y'all are gonna know the joke on that one. It's a big one in like the foreign policy meme world. But if y'all don't know, there's this rumor out there that there is this doomsday plan that exists on the books, to where if we really need to screw over China for some reason, we'll just go in and try and obliterate the Three Gorges Dam, because it's the largest dam in the world and it's also holding the largest water reservoir on the planet. So, and also on top of that, it's structurally unstable. So the idea is that as we hit that with a couple of bombs, the entire dam might collapse, and then the reservoir will flow down the Yangtze and basically destroy every single city in its way. Now, that would be a heinous war crime because of the amount of civilian losses and also the fact that it's more so civilian infrastructure that we'd be attacking. But it actually would be true that that would completely cripple the Chinese in a war if that was to happen. But still, I'd have to say that in my honest opinion, that should never even be considered or done, because I feel like at that point, considering that it probably would have wiped out tens of millions of people in multiple major cities and completely destroyed most of southern China at that point economically, the Chinese probably would go nuclear over something like that. So I think that would be a pretty bad idea to do, because we always have to remember that whenever we do something, the enemy can always react to a similar degree or escalate to what they believe is comparable to that. So probably not a good idea to ever do that. But outside of that, Taiwan does have some offensive capabilities, but it's not a whole lot. Like, they do have their Air Force, which technically could conduct attacks along the coastline, and they also have a small submarine force that could conduct merchant raiding and also try and attack possible amphibious landing groups and such. But they really don't have a lot of offensive capabilities. They basically just have mostly a defensive based force, because the idea is a lot like Switzerland's, to where if they are strong enough to be able to make it nearly impossible to be invaded, then everybody will just kind of leave them alone, because Taiwan would never really have a chance in hell of successfully invading the Chinese mainland and then going on the offensive. It would just be unrealistic. So it's a lot better for them to focus on the porcupine strategy like Switzerland has done historically, to where they go, if you try and invade us, it's going to be so costly, expensive, and deadly, it may as well not be worth it, so don't even try it. And Switzerland has succeeded amazingly with that strategy. It's literally the only thing that stopped them from being invaded by the Germans in World War II, is that the Germans assessed in their planning that Switzerland was going to be so hard, so expensive, and so costly to invade, it just doesn't make sense for what they get out of it. So they just completely gave up on doing that, and that's how Switzerland survived the Second World War without being occupied. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Okay, so we do have a little bit of news right now that apparently there are blasts being heard in Baghdad right now, apparently. So that is a situation going on right now. So we don't know exactly what has been hit. This is largely becoming routine at this point. It appears to be that Baghdad's a pretty favored target of the Iranians. But thankfully, though, the U.S. forces that are located somewhere there, they are very capable of defending themselves for the most part. So, you know, some say those forces are from Iraq, from Baghdad, the way they bag that ass up. That's what they say. That's what they say. I've heard people say that. I guess it's true. It looks like they're defending themselves pretty good. But Enforcer, what say you?
Let's watch the Super Hornet do a strafing run on Chabahar. Ooh! Oh, no way!
Oh, wait, what was that? You said an F-18 or an A-10?
It was a Super Hornet. But here's one thing that
gun sounded familiar.
Yes, it does. Because it's using the little brother to the Gao 30 mil. It's the M61 Vulcan, which is a 20 mil version of the Gao 8 on the A-10. And every aircraft in the U.S. Air Force that isn't an A-10 has this on it. The F-15s, the F-35s, I think the F-22 also has this, the F-18s. Literally every aircraft has this. So, I mean, listen to that noise. Oh! nasty.
Oh,
Oh,
oh man, I'll tell you.
man, I tell you, that's something else right there. That's something else. You see, folks, you don't have to have an A-10 to get that satisfying little burp sound. You can actually get that with basically anyone in any aircraft, in any Air Force. I mean, hell, look, this thing's been around so long, they mounted it onto M113s for an anti-aircraft gun. We need these back, actually, by the way. That would be great for drone defense.
Yeah, probably I would say so.
Nah, put that PVADS on him. Like, man, so, but anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
We also have a $2 super chat from Ryan H.
Oh.
on Orbs. He said, "Why didn't the PLA take Taiwan in the Chinese Civil War?"
That is a great question. Because they didn't have the maritime capabilities to reach them. China, the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China in the Chinese Civil War really effectively did not have a navy. So when the Republic of China under Chiang Kai-shek was just at this point just hands down losing the war on the mainland against Mao Zedong and his communist armies, they all generally evacuated to in exile to Taiwan, which is where they still are today. That government's still there. But in the process of doing that, the PLA couldn't follow them because they don't have any warships or any real amphibious landing capabilities, and neither did the Republic of China. They literally just loaded everyone for the larger part up on normal civilian vessels, like, passenger ships, and just sent them all to Taiwan. So when that happened, the best that the communist armies could do is that they tried to invade this island here called Kinmen County. And on this island was a little bit of the Republic of China's armed forces. Like, I think they had like 1 or 2 Stuart light tanks and about 800 or so guys. And like the story, by the way, of the defense of this island on Kinmen County is insane. Like it's a actually crazy story because there was a smuggling ship that also was here at the same time trying to smuggle like booze and stuff in between some places because they made some good money off of that. And so the Republic of China army went up to the smuggling ship, which was armed, and was like, "Hey, we need y'all to like help us out like really badly. The communists are about to land on this island and it's going to be really bad." So the communists tried to land, and the smuggling ship actually, because they got paid by the ROC guys on the island, they started to light up the Chinese landing parties. And once they landed there, the ROC fired on these landing parties until they ran out of ammunition, and then they used the Stuart light tanks to just try and run over anyone who was left on the beach, who was alive and still fighting. I mean, it was an absolutely insane fight, but the Chinese Communist Army lost this fight so badly, the PLA did, on Kinmen County Island, they never took it. And they just completely stopped there. And that's basically when the Civil War froze in place. That's why Taiwan still controls that little island, literally just 2 miles off of the coast of China, is for that reason. And so that's why they never really went and invaded Taiwan back then. They didn't even have the abilities to successfully invade and take Kinmen County, which is basically in Xiamen Harbor, much less the island of Taiwan, which would have been well out of their abilities to actually drop soldiers onto that island. And that's why they've never taken it. So I hope that does address your question well. Great question, by the way, and a really interesting one. But with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one.
So our next one here goes to none other than Essay, who said, "But what's going to happen when they can't keep the drones down? And won't that mean huge retaliations and maybe tactical nukes?" And also, he's referring to the Moscow drone attacks on Moscow, generally speaking. If the Kremlin is hit, if it's something that causes casualties in the Kremlin, that has a decent possibility of causing a tactical nuclear retaliation. To be perfectly honest, that does have that risk to it. But if it ends up, doing something like taking Putin out, that's going to pretty much guarantee that Ukraine's going to be wiped off the map for the most part. That's not exaggeration. Some people say that's a propaganda, or that's like giving Putin too much credit. I mean, Russia has nukes. I'm sure a lot of them probably don't work, but all they need is a few to cause hell. So, I mean, that would be troublesome. So I don't think they'll be hitting the Kremlin with drones in that type of manner, probably whatsoever. But it doesn't prevent Ukraine from at least causing the panic. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that they're going to respond pretty heavily if the Ukrainians ever hit the Kremlin, but the reality is the Ukrainians won't, because there's really no strategic reason to hit it, and there's a lot of other targets in Moscow that could be hit that would be a lot better to hit. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And also, I saw someone in the chat say, it was very interesting, it was actually a little bit about the history-related stuff. Someone said, "I never heard of that island." Yeah, it's not really heard about a lot, and like, speaking of that, this is something that a lot of people don't consider. You can have the largest army in the world. Like, I could get together 5 million guys and have them all hanging out in Salt Lake City. And if I said, okay, we're going to go, let's just say for the hypothetical like sake of this argument, we're going to go invade Heber City because it's like some other country or something like that. How do we get through the mountains here to get to Heber? If there's no roads there and we don't have any trucks and it's the middle of winter and there's a blizzard going on, how in the world do I get those 5 million men to Heber even to invade it with it only being like 20 miles away? I mean, in reality, it's more like 50 because you have to get through the mountains. But the answer is that you can. And it doesn't matter how big of a military that you have to have the abilities to move them around. And that's why Taiwan survived for so long. That's also why in other wars, something will look clearly obvious. Like, it's like, wow, you know, the Germans had absolutely destroyed the French in the Battle of France in 1940. And it basically rendered the British Army completely moot in terms of actual offensive power. Like, all of their tanks and stuff were lost at Dunkirk. Why the hell did the Germans not invade Britain? And it's just because they couldn't. They didn't have the landing ships for it. They didn't really have the navy for it. And then on top of that, they would have had to duke it out with the home fleet right off of the coast of the UK to even try and get to the British coast. And that's why they never did it, is because they just didn't have the ability. If they had actually had the landing ships, they probably would have been able to land in the UK and force the British government to capitulate or just surrender to the Germans and then peace out or become a German puppet state. It was definitely possible. But because of the realistic limitations, it's just not possible. And that's why, folks, you always have to consider when we talk about a war, it's not always about numbers like this country has 1 million troops and this other country has 300,000. There's a lot of other factors. I mean, terrain alone and the equipment that that other army has is a humongous factor in whether they're going to succeed or fail. Because if you're saying, okay, let's invade Ukraine, and there's a mountain range that's 10,000 feet tall that is on the border between Russia and Ukraine, and it spans the whole length of the border, chances are they'll never go to war. I mean, if Russia did, they would fail badly because they'd never make it through the mountains in the first place to get to the other side. And if they didn't have the ability to just bypass those mountains, they'd be stuck there forever. That's how wars are actually fought and won a lot of the times, is just based off of one enemy force not having the equipment to actually deal with a terrain feature, and then another country using that terrain feature to basically create a bottleneck and keep that enemy country there for as long as possible, or just defeat them by making it impossible to actually invade them. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
Our next question goes to SKS, who said, wouldn't an invasion of Taiwan cripple the Chinese economy if the U.S. ceases trade and sanctions are placed? And they've been pragmatic so far, and do they just get irrational about reunification? Now, the U.S. really can't just cease trade with China. Like, that's a myth. That's not possible. The economies of the United States and China are highly intertwined. And if we even wanted to attempt to do something like that, to cease trade and put sanctions to a massive degree on China, that would take years to prevent economic damage to the United States from basically destroying our economy. So it's impossible to do it immediately if there was, like, for example, a Taiwan invasion from China. But you could do it over the course of years. But by then, it's probably too late. But Enforcer, what say you?
There really is no way to ever completely stop trade instantaneously with someone without causing tectonic damage. China isn't really our largest trading partner. Our largest trading partners are actually Canada, Mexico, and really the European Union, and also ASEAN, which is the, I believe it's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations is what ASEAN stands for. Those are our 4 largest trading partners on the globe. China is actually, I believe, the 5th behind those 4. And I think our total trade with them these days is around like $550 billion to $475 billion. It's somewhere around there. But cutting that off overnight is going to cause huge damage, not only to China, but to us as well. So that makes it impossible in reality to just completely slash trade with someone. It's very destructive to us as much as it is to them. So what you can do is that you can try and talk to U.S. companies, because all of these U.S., like, the only reason we have heavy trade with China is because a whole bunch of U.S. companies that used to manufacture in America offshore to China. That's literally the only reason we trade with them heavily, is because of that. So what we could do is we could talk to those U.S. companies and be like, hey, look, for strategic interests, we're going to have y'all move out of China at some point. So you're going to have to figure out when that's opportune and move somewhere else, like Mexico maybe. But y'all can't stay in China. It's just not good for us. And generally a war is coming, and we're going to have to probably cut trade with them anyways. So you might want to beat the curb, you know, and keep your shareholders happy and just take the initial cost now and move manufacturing to Mexico or someplace. And that would take years. But by then the trade would be mitigated to the point that it'd be small enough, like, you know, say about $75 billion to $50 billion, that if you cut trade off with them then, it would hurt us a little, but it wouldn't be completely destructive like it would be in the state we're in with them right now. So you kind of have to do that over years to be able to even cut trade with them, because it'd have to be minimal enough that it wouldn't cause damage to just completely slash the trade with them at that point. And then outside of that, as far as going to war with Taiwan, really that'd be more so a naval and amphibious sort of a war, so we really wouldn't have to worry about much more than making sure that the Navy and the Marines were capable of carrying that fight. The Air Force, of course, would be involved, but the Army would basically be taking a seat and sitting it out during that war, and it would be important for the Army at that point to dedicate a lot of its attentions towards Europe, because that's really where the Army is best suited for any form of warfare that we may be facing in the modern age. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
So we do have a little bit of, excuse me, by the way, goodness. We have a little bit of dash cam footage coming out of CRAM activity. We had just seen, or I just reported a minute ago, that there were explosions being reported in Baghdad, apparently near the Victory base in Baghdad. So it looks like some Iraqi was driving down the road and caught the CRAM firing, apparently from Victory base, which is pretty crazy. Let's take a look.
And oh, there it is, right there. You can hardly see it, but you see the
You hardly see through that watermark right there. Really, that watermark's blocking all the action.
man, that watermark, like, dang. But you can kind of see the rounds firing off in the distance there, and also an explosion. Actually, that appeared to be a successful interception right there, because it occurred a little bit up in the air, and you can also see the rounds continuing to fly upwards and then detonating by fuse proximity at a certain distance of time. So we can see that right there. Pretty interesting to see it. But it is showing air defense activity over Baghdad at the moment right now. So we can confirm that there are explosions going on there, and there is active air defense in that area, even from possibly the slightly degraded air defenses and the CRAMs at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. So I hope that does address that well. Thanks to Enforcement Matt for sharing that news with us. And with that, Matthew, how many questions do we have left in our spreadsheet?
We have just about 4 left.
Oh, and so with that, we're on to the fourth to last question of the stream.
And this one goes to Il, who said, do you think regime change is still possible? And is there any point to all this if not? Long live the LSA, Slav Ukraine, and praise the orb. And also count this as my question. So here was the objective, just to list them off originally. The objectives was to dismantle Iran's ballistic missile research program, because they were advancing very rapidly in ballistic missiles technology. So that was one objective right there. Objective number 2 was to make a second pass on Iran's nuclear facilities, because the U.S. government claimed that they were completely destroyed during summer of 2025. It turns out that really wasn't the case, so they were making another pass at it. Also, objective number 3 was to preferably retrieve the highly enriched uranium and take it into U.S. custody or destroy it. And that was objective number 3. And then also a bonus on top of that. A bonus would be regime change. And they were hoping that the Iranian people would take to the streets like they were doing before the U.S. showed up, and that maybe by striking the IRGC, maybe that would free up the Iranian protesters to take over the government. But that one's looking a little bit unlikely at this point. But the rest of them are still on the table to a large degree. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say that, in my opinion, I think that the original war goal, because this was the original one stated by the president, was to overthrow the Islamic regime. Because while we are trying to stop their ICBM, nuclear weapons, and also funding of terrorism throughout the region, generally we were wanting to achieve that initially by seeing a collapse of the Islamic regime, because through that, pretty much all of those programs would inherently stop through a passive measure, because while we wouldn't be completely destroying their ICBM development, their nuclear development, and also the flow of money to those terrorist forces, by removing the government that is involved in all of those actions, we would be ending those programs. And since we've seen about a week and a half in, they've completely changed the war goal now to where they're trying to cut down the size, the Iranian Air Force, the Iranian Army, the Navy, and also some of the governmental top officials. And that's now their new stated war goal. As far as the original war goal, at least with how far they're taking it right now, I don't really know if that is going to be possible, because they're not really taking enough direct action, and also on top of that, the Iranian government has proven to be more resilient than anticipated, and doesn't appear to be imminently collapsing anytime soon. However, the secondary war goals of cutting them down to size, that is possible, But the problem is that as far as our long-term foreign policy strategies and initiatives are concerned, this isn't achieving what we need. To achieve what we would be looking for, we would have to see that the Islamic Republic of Iran's government is removed, because by then, all of the programs that we said are a threat would cease to exist. If the Islamic regime exists after this war is over, they will eventually restart their ICBM development, their nuclear weapons development, and they will continuously, like they even are right now, fund their terrorist forces in the region, meaning that by our original war goal, we wouldn't have succeeded. As far as the war went on the ground, especially if we left the Strait of Hormuz, technically, this is a tactical victory, but strategically, it would be something along the lines of a defeat because we wouldn't be able to achieve our actual war goals. So I'd say, really, in my honest opinion, folks, the U.S. has to see, somehow, some way, at this point, by any measure, really, that we eventually overthrow the Islamic regime. Otherwise, I'll be honest with y'all, I'm going to count this as a strategic defeat, although we were able to achieve a tactical victory over Iran on the battlefield. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, but I think that we need to make sure that we stay true to our original war goals, because I strongly believe that by those war goals, we will actually achieve what we're looking for in Iran. But with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a question from Phoenix, who said, do you think the IRGC will wheel out their much talked about Mardi to save them? Or do you think they'll say, we've got this, so keep him hidden to save them at a later date?
They might keep him hidden. Like, I think they're
Who is
probably
that?
I don't know. Like, but I think they might keep him hidden. I mean, like, that's what I said. I think they might keep him hidden. I was like, I don't know who that is, but I guess they'll keep him in hiding for now. But I hope that does address that the best.
Are they talking about Mohammad Reza Mahdi? Are they talking about the Iran? Are they talking about that guy?
I guess I don't really know actually. Like, I have to
I think
say,
that guy's dead.
I think he's dead. Like, I think he might be. Like, I don't know. But beyond that, I saw someone say, someone asked you a good question. This will count for a question. Aaron Rock said, when was the last time we strategically won a war? Well, believe it or not, Iraq technically was a strategic victory. And I know a lot of people don't really look at it that way because the occupation went on for an incredibly long time. But if you look at Iraq today, when our invasion began in 2003, what was the goal behind the invasion of Iraq? It was to overthrow the regime of Saddam Hussein and to locate and destroy the programs that were trying to lead to some form of a creation of a weapon of mass destruction through nuclear, biological, or chemical means. And while the nuclear, biological, and chemical threats never coalesced in Iraq because that intelligence was faulty and incorrect, we did achieve our war goal of, one, removing the Saddam regime from power and installing a new government in Iraq, which is the Republic of Iraq, which still exists today. So in that sense, while we were there for an incredibly long time and people didn't like the long-term occupation, strategically, that was actually a victory because we achieved our two original war goals when we invaded Iraq. We stopped the developments of weapons of mass destruction, which by de facto was achieved because there were none, and then we removed the Saddam regime from power and replaced it with another form of government, which we also achieved. Afghanistan was a strategic defeat, a tactical victory, a lot like the war in Iran could become, but a strategic defeat because while we were able to best the Taliban in basically every engagement we literally bested the Taliban in every engagement we had with them, we were not able to achieve our long-term goal of removing the Taliban from power inside of Afghanistan, and after a withdrawal in 2021, they returned to power. So that was a strategic defeat. But Iraq was, by all measures, a strategic victory. Is Saddam around? Is Uday Qusay around running the government? No. So that was a victory by all measure. The goal for in 1991 was also a strategic and tactical victory, so it was a victory on all ends, because our original war goal there was to remove the illegal occupation of Kuwait by the Republic of Iraq, which we were able to achieve successfully by encircling the Iraqi armies inside of Kuwait during the trapdoor maneuver that was conducted by General Schwarzkopf in 1991. So there has been a lot of strategic victories that the United States has achieved in the past 30 years, but we have to make sure that we gear our war goals here to making sure that we actually achieve the victory we need, which isn't a tactical victory in this sense. It is a strategic victory by all measures. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on, I believe, to the second to last question of the night.
So this one goes to David Lindbergh. He said, wouldn't a land invasion of Kashim be more reasonable since it's closer to the Strait of Hormuz than invading Karg Island, which is located far into the Persian Gulf?
Yes, generally that would be a lot more successful, and generally trying to conduct invasions of the Iraq and Hormuz. But in reality, it's probably going to take a wider sweeping operation to see that not only do we take control of some of these islands, but we'd also have to eliminate all of the anti-ship threats that are on the mainland, because sure, the islands are in the strait, but they can still threaten to fire upon and fire upon ships from the mainland of Iran around the area of the Strait of Hormuz. So while I don't think it's smart for us to land on the mainland of Iran, because the entire Iranian army could throw itself onto whatever beachheads created and then attempted to be held for however long, I think it would be a smart idea to see that we at least conduct some form of pinpoint operations, even on the ground in some cases, to see that certain sites of anti-ship missile activity or anti-ship drone activity is targeted and destroyed, so that way we can remove most of the existing threats within the strait. We'll never be able to remove all of them. They'll still have a little bit here and there, but that's what the convoy escorts are there to deal with, is to shoot down any of those remaining threats. But we need to destroy most of the threats on those islands and also on shore in the strait and also in the Gulf of Oman. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on the final question of this stream. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be Christian Cruz. He said, the ban on the manufacture and use of cluster munitions hasn't been signed by neither the United States, Iran, or Israel. So isn't cluster munitions kind of fair game?
Kinda. But, I mean, huh?
He's right.
He's right. I mean, like, I have to say, yeah, he is right. But I'd have to say, to be entirely honest, I think that everyone else who banned them was well within reason to do that. I mean, a lot of cluster bombs actually don't explode, and they kind of look a little bit like toys. And the idea behind not using them on populated urban centers is that if you do that, especially with a lot of civilians around, some kids are going to get a hold of those, and it's going to blow up and kill them when they pick it up. So that's generally why we don't want to see those used on populated urban areas. So, I mean, technically, for most countries in the world, what Iran is doing is a war crime. But you're actually right on that. Technically, according to what Geneva Conventions and also limitations on munitions usage that Israel, Iran, and the United States have signed, technically it's not a war crime, although I would easily say that it is. But by the letter of the law, it's not.
That's the problem when you're fighting a terrorist regime like Iran. The problem is, if you're obviously with Iran being a terrorist regime, they resort to measures which are generally off limits for everybody else for the most part, because they, of course, are terrorists, and terrorists, their entire intent is to hurt people. So when the United States, being in the West, generally abides by the rules of decency, even in war, because I know some people find that to be a strange concept. They're like, well, decency in war, it's war. Yeah, but there's technically some things like even in the midst of war, which is terrible, there's still some things that, nations that actually have decency will say, look, we can't go that far. That's going too far. Like, wars have to be fought for defense, but we don't want to cause unnecessary suffering in that country on the civilian population. That's only decent to think that way. So, when you're fighting a terrorist regime, we can't resort to measures like that, or we'll be no better than the terrorists. But at the same time, though, we're at a massive disadvantage because we can't do the same things in retaliation to the terrorist regime that's fighting us. So it's really that's why it's awful fighting a terrorist regime like this, because it's unfair, but we can't start stooping to the level of a terrorist regime. That would be unacceptable.
I would say that it's maybe unfair, but I mean, in reality, I mean, what have the Iranians really done in practical damage with those cluster rounds that we would want to do against them? Because they've only targeted civilians with those cluster rounds in Tel Aviv and other big cities, and the U.S. doesn't go out of its way to attack civilians. So I guess in the number of possible civilians they're killing, they're beating us. And, if we wanted to go around wiping out civilians, we could start using cluster rounds on places like Tehran and stuff. But the U.S. doesn't do that. We're not a nation of barbarians. We're a civilized nation of civilized peoples here. And so we don't go around bombing civilians. We do everything we can to mitigate civilian collaterals as much as we possibly can. So I would say generally, as far as giving them advantage, I mean, like in like an abstract, it kind of does, but in reality, with who they're targeting with those weapons, it really doesn't do much of anything for them, but try and take out a couple of more civilians. And I would always say, folks, that no matter what, we should always stick to our values and morals and our beliefs, and we should always make sure that we're fighting war honorably, as we would as Americans. Because when our army fights overseas, they're not fighting as a man; they're fighting as a soldier of the Republic and a representative of our will. And by the will of the Republic, we should be seeing that our army is as civilized and as humane as it possibly can be, even in the throes and clutches of war. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that in mind, folks, it's actually time for us to end the stream. We've got to thank you all so much for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run the stream for all of y'all. And I have to say that I hope y'all have enjoyed the stream. We sadly will not be having a stream later tonight because we have things that we have to tend to tomorrow very early in the morning at 2 o'clock in the morning local time, which is about 10 hours from now. And we have to make sure to be ready for that. So with that in mind, we will not be running a stream tonight, and we also will not have short war videos coming out tomorrow and the next day. But on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, we will be back, and we will be on air at 10 p.m. Eastern Time with our normal coverage of the past 48 hours of news from around the world. I also have to say really quickly, folks, that coming to think of this, Matthew, I think today was your video day because yesterday was mine. So when we come back, let's see, today was your day, tomorrow will be mine, and then the next day after that will be yours. So on Wednesday, the next person to make a video is going to be me. Like, that is a long amount of time to try and figure that out for. But our next short war video, if one is made, and it depends on us having enough news to make it, will be around on Wednesday if it can come out. So with that, we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, Heram Slava, long live the Lead Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all on Tuesday night at our usual time on the nightly War News stream, of course, at 10 p.m. Eastern. And we will see you all, of course, so when we get back from this small little hiatus here. And we do appreciate you all, 235,000 plus people, for joining us in the middle of the day today for the news once again. And we will be seeing you all very, very soon. And also a big shout out to everybody, by the way, for helping us to hit almost $3,700 raised of the goal. That is fantastic right there. It has been smashed through and through, and we genuinely appreciate that as well. But with that, we'll see you all again on Tuesday. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heram Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Spring on his shores.